Good morning. I'd like to call the Door County Board of Supervisors public hearing to order at approximately 9 a.m. Could I have a roll call, please? We have 21 present, thank you. Adopt the agenda.
Move to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The purpose of this hearing is to allow the opportunity to present suggestions and comments on the Door County budget 2020 as proposed by the Administrator and Finance Director, approved by the Finance Committee, and submitted for action later today by the Board of Supervisors per statute 65.9 Wisconsin statutes. Is there anybody that has signed up or chosen to speak on the budget? I have to ask this 3 times. Is there anybody that wants to speak on the budget? 3rd time. Is there anybody present who would like to speak on the budget? With that, I will close the public hearing. We need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I'd like to call the Door County Board of Supervisors meeting to order at approximately 9:05 a.m. Please join me in Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll do a roll call again momentarily. Okay. Bob, what you got? And we have 21 present again. Great. Didn't lose anybody. Presentation of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We'll start off with recognition of the 2019 WC SEA Attorney of the Year. Grant?
Good morning. Rod's making his way up to the podium. You can hold that up.
Okay.
You know why we're here today. Rod was awarded in September of 2019 the WICSIA, which stands for the Wisconsin Child Support Enforcement Agency Association. It's a statewide organization that gives this award once a year, and Rod is a well-deserved recipient. And I should take a step back. And Rod has been with us for 20 years. I remember, if you'll let me go back and walk through history a bit, that Leo Zipper and I walked down to
Stone
Harbor, where Rod was at a conference and perhaps had a beer or two. And we offered him the job then, and it was rather unique because we had come up with the idea, and I think we're one of the first ones to do it, to have the Child Support Agency Director also be the Child Support Agency Attorney. And I'd be willing to guess, without having any facts to back this up, is that he's served in that capacity probably longer than anybody else in the state.
Yes.
Rod and I are similarly situated. When we took these jobs, we thought we would be here for 5 years, and here he stands 22 years later. So, but in all seriousness, this is in recognition of Rod's service over the years and furtherance of the county's objectives and the Child Support Agency's objectives. It's a very significant award, and again, as I said, one that it was well-deserved, so.
I would just say that without a great staff, I don't get this award. They make me look really good. We have some good people working in the Child Support Agency. We work well with the courts and with the clerk of courts. We try to do the best we can, and they give me the time to be able to do the things that need to be done for the association as well, like going to Madison and meeting with legislators, which we've done way too much this year. So I'm just thankful for the opportunity, and I was really grateful for this award. It was a big surprise.
Okay, correspondence. In your packet, you would have received a letter from the Village of Forestville, Resolution RE Forestville Mill Pond. Public comment. Does anybody in the audience care to make a public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Schusler from Door County Economic Development, here to speak on behalf of the importance of broadband and some opportunities that we have before us to help move in a positive direction. I want to extend thanks to Administrator Pavick, who's been working in collaboration with DCDC on this. We've been shoulder to shoulder on this project because we know that having good, reliable broadband today is like what getting indoor plumbing was like years ago. I don't know if anybody else was as surprised as I was that Gibraltar recently did a survey of their students and learned that 1 out of every 5 students of their elementary students does not have internet at home or reliable internet at home. And in today's day and age, that's just not acceptable. So we've got some opportunities to move in that direction. And if these opportunities pan out next year, I think they really put us in a position early in the next decade to ensure that all of Door County is well covered. One is related to Washington Island, and Mick from Insight is here that can take into the details later on. But the exciting thing about this is it leverages the significant multi-million-dollar investment in fiber that Insight made when they Cellcom, you'd know them as more likely, made that investment in fiber all the way up to the town of Liberty Grove. That proposal will get us to Gills Rock, to North Point Pier, across to Lobdell's Point, up to their tower on the north end of the island. And my favorite part of their proposal, as Lee Thibodeau shared with me from Insight, passing all key community anchor institutions along the way. So that's good news. The other consideration, Door County Economic Development's board unanimously supported the resolutions behind these projects. I was also at a meeting with the Village of Egg Harbor last night where they unanimously supported a proposal for a pilot project that Insight is proposing in Egg Harbor. Between those 2 projects alone, it really helps us create some opportunity that we can then build upon as we look into 2021. I shared with Administrator Pavick this morning and encouraged him to pass something along to you. We've been working with WTC a lot on getting information out on the importance of broadband internet. And I encourage you to take a look. And there's also an article from the New York Times dated yesterday about a rural area in Ohio and the things that they're going through. We have some of those challenges here too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all.
Thank you. Anybody else care to speak on public comment? We're going to be adjourning in and out of several different sessions today, so bear with us. Next, we're going to adjourn as the county board and convene into our annual budget session. We need a motion.
Motion
I'll
to
make a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, you're all set.
Okay.
Steve, want to come up?
Mr. Chairman?
Motion to reconvene.
Yeah. If we needed a motion to adjourn, do we need another motion to reconvene into the budget cycle, or you want to, do we open that, or how do we do that? Just go into it?
Number 9.
Yeah, number 9. Reconvene.
Right, but that's after, right now, we're in, we adjourned what we were.
Correct.
We're moving into the budget session. So do we need a motion to go into the budget session? No. And then adjourn from it?
No, we're not.
I think we made the motion to go into
Yeah.
the budget session, and then we would make the motion to go out of it and reconvene as county board. I guess that's how I would look at it, unless I'm not following you.
They did a motion to adjourn, but they didn't say motion to adjourn and convene in budget session is what they're asking.
I'll amend my motion.
Right.
We were just curious.
Mr. Fisher's correct.
Don't tell him that.
Megan was correct.
We have
I'll
to
make-
agree every once in a while.
Once in a while, right?
Okay, so our motion was to adjourn as the county board, which we agreed to, and convene into the budget session.
And I second it.
Okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Now we're legal.
All right, we're all set?
Yep. all set.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. I know you have all seen the budget in different parts or different ways at various committees, but this is probably your first chance to see the entire budget and hear, I guess, about the entire budget overall. And again, while you've seen this multiple times, the members of the public probably have not heard about it as much, so I'd still like to take the time to at least walk through the budget and give you some details in terms of our expenditures and revenues and how we're looking as a government overall in terms of how we're operating. We do have some changes to the budget, which we'll get into. But what I would like to do is we actually put out handouts. I changed it up a little bit instead of using the computer. You had mentioned you like the hard copy, so we're going to walk through the hard copies for the budget today. And if you did rearrange them, they were all in order. So this is, and if you rearranged them,
Should
I'll
have
get-
said something.
I'll get you, it says something to you, but I'll get you back on track. So for the first one, we're just going to start with, it says across the top, it says the Door County 2020 budget. It's the 2020 levy limit calculation compared to the 2019 levy limit. It looks, if you can look up, it looks like this, almost like a little spreadsheet.
Oh,
Okay. So let's just talk about that. And yeah, there is extra copies up at the table for individuals that want those copies. So really quick, so what I'd like to just spend a minute, this is actually what we can spend, all right? And this is directly related to how we're impacted by the levy limits. So let me just take a quick moment just to kind of give you an idea of how this impacts us. So really quick, just walking through, at the very top, it shows you what we are allowed to spend in 2019. That's our base. Then what they do is they allow us to increase our spending by what's called the net new construction. So that second line down, it actually shows you that our percent net new construction is 1.156%. So that gives us an extra $282,756 that we can add on in additional spending. So that gives you that total figure there of that $24,742,596. So that is what we are allowed to spend. But now there is some other items that we can consider outside the levy that you add on to that. So you'll see the initial one is what we consider the bridge aid. I jumped ahead. So the first ones are our debt issuance. You'll see those for our 2015 debt issuance, and then also our 2017. That then brings our total up to $27,123,141. And then we can add on our expenses that are considered outside the cap. So we have our ambulance, our ES expenses. That's the $3.255 million, and then our bridge aid at $25,000. The one thing that we must adjust, the state in its wisdom gives us some money, but also has us take it out right away. So we can't use it towards our levy limit. So that's that negative 76,821. So that comes off the top in terms of what is against or can't be used against our cap. So all that being said, that gives us a total maximum 2020 levy limit allowed of $30,326,420. Any questions on that? Yes.
The subtracted amount, the personal property aid, could you just give a little clarification on what that amounts to or where that comes from?
So that is the calculation that started actually last year. The state does this calculation. I'm not sure exactly where they get the numbers from. And it was a new thing that they gave us, and it was a revenue that we had to record. But on the flip side, they said, okay, well, we're going to give you this revenue, but on the turn, you have to subtract it out on your tax levy. You got to take that amount on your tax levy. Why they did it that way, I have no idea. So there is a calculation that goes into it. Last year was like around 84,000, and then now this year we're going to 76,821. So we're getting as a revenue. The state's going to send us money. They'll send us a check sometime in 2020, and then but we have to, that amount has to come off our tax levy.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is just take that sheet and just put it off to the side. We'll refer back to it. I know we're kind of stopping midway through, but what I'd like to then do is now jump to the blue sheets. There should be, in your case, it's going to be back to back, but we'll start on the front. And I'm just going to walk you through, I guess, our budget. So it's going to start, if you're on the right side, we're going to start actually with the general fund. And again, what I'd like to do is just kind of walk through the budget in general. You're going to see some areas that are highlighted in yellow, and those are the areas we need to make some amendments, but I'll get into that a little bit later when we get to the budget. So let's just start off the top. We have what we consider the general administration. That's kind of our one way of saying our catch-all in terms of our general expenses. If you look at underneath there, you'll see certain things underneath the revenues. You can see a total of $5 million, but below that, we actually have that broken out with some detail. So you'll see $365,299 was applied from our excess sales tax. We have the $688,854. That's under the other reserves applied. That's really what we're looking at there is we're taking some money out of our building fund plus also our vehicle replacement funding. We're applying $470,000 out of our workman's comp fund. Our workman's comp fund has, I guess, excess dollars, so we're drawing some money out of that, and we're using it towards one-time expenses. So that's a key point. We're applying it towards one-time expenses. And then you'll also see we're actually taking $922,538 out of our undesignated fund reserve, and we're also applying that towards a one-time expense. The primary application of those dollars is we're in the budget, we have created a new reserve fund of $1 million, and that is for our placements within human services. And really what that is that gives us a little bit of a cushion. We actually had human services meeting yesterday. We're trending right now, depending on where the final budget comes in, we're about $800,000 above our expenditures that we projected just because of the number of placements. Again, we're not sure where that'll finish up, but we'll deal with that as we close. But this fund will actually help, I guess, in the future, handle that spike. Yes.
Can I ask questions as we go?
Sure. If you have questions, just ask me as we go.
Yeah. So just looking at that general fund, then there's $100,000 change from what we were originally at finance. What the 2020 budget was proposed to what we're looking at today, exactly $100,000, and that's under the other reserves applied. So why would there be a change there?
Correct. So that one, we actually adjusted the budget. We went through both facilities and parks, and then through the process, we actually added $100,000 for the lighting project at the Justice Center and the Government Center. That's the LED lighting project.
Okay.
But there was no impact on the budget because we're taking that $100,000 out of our reserve fund for our building maintenance account. So that's where that change was.
Thank you.
The other part that's within that general administration includes such items such as our payroll liabilities. Also, it includes our pay for performance program and also our increases. Underneath that, funding, you also see I have a line underneath the budget for special studies. So we have a special study identified for the Sheriff's Department. And we also have a special study identified for a cooperative project with Pewaukee County in terms of looking at the potential of actually combining our call centers. Again, that's, I guess, further out. The first phase is just looking at the technology side. But that's actually considered all within that general administration. So let's just kind of go through other things that are, I guess, within the budget itself that's kind of captured underneath that general administration. Again, we have the aging of the plan, which is the resolution that's going to be after the budget, but we're proposing to age the plan 3%. It does include our pay for performance program also within that area. So that kind of covers the general administration. Also, general administration includes all of our insurance for everything that we have in terms of, I guess, our general property and liability programs and all that. So that's kind of a large bucket in terms of the funding that's within that area. Then continuing down on that page, I guess I'll just kind of go through, I guess, some of the bigger departments in terms of the changes. The one thing that you'll notice, I guess, any change, I guess, is I consider around that 4% range or under, I guess, is kind of what I consider status quo. Again, the reason why you're seeing some of those increases around at 4% is we had an increase in our insurance, which I will talk about. So that insurance impacted all the payroll lines in everyone's budget, and that created that increase. If there's adjustments that are above that, I can kind of maybe just, I'll highlight them if I think they're of significance. But items that do stand out in terms of changes would obviously be the clerk of courts and also the district attorney. You'll see those are both 14% and 15% respectively. Again, right now they increased their budgets just trying to plan for that pending trial that's projected to hit next year. And we don't know the exact cost, but we do have some of the costs built in as far as the extra expenses related to that. Likewise, you'll see also the county clerk is at 21%. Again, that goes up and down this on our election cycles, but that is all related to the elections itself. The next item would be emergency management and communications. You'll see that at 24.18%. That increase is accounted for the positions that are being proposed or that were approved to be added into the budget. And that's that expense related to that. Facilities and parks, you'll see at 8.13. Again, that budget's mainly reflected to some of the increases in our expenses. One of those obviously being the new building we acquired, just in terms of operating costs for that building. So you'll see part of that increase related in his budget. Next item that has, I guess, a larger increase was human services at 9.93%. Again, not really any new spending in that, but what we did is we have both our employee picnic and also we do quarterly employee luncheons for new employees. We were taking that out of the general admin budget, but it makes more appropriate for it to come out of the human resources department, so we just actually shifted that money. So it's not really new spending, but it's just allocating the expenses to the right department. Obviously, the other big change you'll see is the museum. It's currently listed as a separate department yet, but actually under our proposal, the museum's actually going to move underneath the library. But this, in terms of expenses, that does have an increase of 103%. And again, that is for 2 positions related to the museum. And if you've been following the process, we've been working on the museum probably for about 2 years in terms of our study of what to do. And it's really one of those things we've looked at multiple options in terms of how to best handle the museum and how we move forward. And we've looked at things such as external partnerships. We had some discussions on, do we still want to be in the museum? And we had some of those hard discussions, but everything came circle back to, at this point in time, is that we still want to maintain the museum, but we still need to do something to, I guess, maintain that asset. And that's being what's proposed, is those 2 positions. I guess then going down, nothing else really stands out in terms of changes. If you look then at the bottom, you'll see the total change in the tax levy is actually a negative 1.88. So in other words, under that entire section, our expenses are down 1.88%. The one thing is there is one, I guess, one catch, is that we did move public health out of there. So if you look under public health, you see that as a zero expense. But public health is about $575,000. So if I add that back in, we're just a little bit above positive, but you'll see that's caught up on the next page. So just wanted to point that out as a change. The other thing I think is important to point out is we do have the transportation budget built into the budget as well. That's towards the bottom. And you'll see NA in terms of percent change, but you'll see the total tax levy impact is $192,940. And that is built into the budget. Okay, let's flip the page. So if you look under then Human Services and or under the Special Revenue Fund, you'll start off with Human Services. Again, you'll see NA at the very top line, but then the line below it says Health and Human Services. And you can see their increases. What I did is just for, in case you would ask, is, okay, what's the total spending change between health and also human services combined? Their increase is about 2.73%. And again, so what you're seeing in that case is that they did have some increased expenses, especially related to our insurance, but they also have additional dollars coming in revenue. So their budget came in only at 2.73% in terms of an overall increase. The other, that's why I consider an item that stands out would be the Senior Resource Center, or the ADRC. You'll see a negative 17.87%. That's really because we pulled out transportation and we moved that to the page in front. So they had a huge drop in expenses related to their operations. Again, that's when I can't give you an exact percentage increase because the budget changed so much for transportation that it's not a dollar for dollar increase. But just based on what I could estimate, we're probably around that 2-3% change in the ADRC in terms of spending overall. Okay, then debt service, I think that's pretty clear. There's actually two debt services that we fund. One is in 15 and one in 17. You can see those there. Those are on a schedule, and those don't really adjust too much. Then we drop down to our internal service fund, and we have the highway department. And you can see that's $11,465,228. And again, you'll see a 0% increase. Again, the way the highway department runs, again, it's its own enterprise, so their numbers have to match revenue and expenses. One question that might be is, well, how are we spending an additional $1 million within that area? Again, I'd account that to several things. We got some additional funding from the state in terms of our operations for road maintenance. We also increased some of our spending a little bit towards our winter operations. And also John does his projections in terms of contracts that he actually gets from the towns and other municipalities. He put that all together and it comes up with that magic number, but he has to match those expenses and revenues to have that balance. But in essence, that's why our expenses are up, but also our revenues are also up in terms of matching. The next item, that's the 0%, but it should be something that's important to point out, is our medical and dental insurance. You'll see that went from about 6.7 million to 7.5 million. So this is our, if you're familiar with our insurance program, we're self-insured. In other words, we manage our insurance ourselves. For the past, I think it's 7 years, or no, 5 years, we have not made any increases on our insurance, which is pretty amazing. But we've kind of hit that limit, and this year we got hit pretty good. We're looking at actually a 19% increase. We had projected a 15% increase, but our final rates came through and we're at a 19% increase overall. We were able to, I guess, account for some of that increase by making some changes in our plan. In other words, what we provide in our insurance. But then the other part of it's built in to that increase, and that's what the impact is. So that's one of the things we definitely need to watch moving forward. So if we get hit by another insurance increase, we can still make some adjustments within our plan, but we're running out of our, I guess, our tools to adjust those costs. So some of those are going to start hitting this line more and more. So just want to point that out. Then just moving down, you'll see our capital projects. That's 2.59%. Again, that's pretty much on target of what we projected within the budget. And then you look at our stuff that would be, I guess, outside the cap. And then you'll see those total numbers then in yellow. So you have the 50,807,652 in terms of revenues. The expenditures is the 81,134,072 with a tax levy of 30,326,420. So overall, our net expenditures are up 1.87%. But then if you go down to that bottom box, you'll see that yellow number that's highlighted. You'll see that our tax rate proposed for 2020 is at $4.08, but we have to carry it out all those digits. We're required to do such. And you'll actually see that that's a tax rate decrease of 2.25%. So the one thing to point out, and I'm sure that's going to be a question for some, if you look at the trends, so if you look at 2018, 2019, and 2020, if you look at the trends, look at what we consider where it says EV TID out. So you'll see for example, in 2018, there was a value of about $7 billion. That was an increase of 0.73 from the previous year. Then if you go to 2019, you'll see that was an increase to 7.1 billion, an increase of 1.4. And then this was I guess the one surprise, to all of us. You'll see that in 2020, the state is proposing that we're at 7.4 billion. So really, that's what's driving that tax rate down is the increase. So you'll see that increase of 4.21%, which to me was very significant. So we actually, at Finance Committee, we actually talked about it. And we actually followed up with the state twice just to make sure that we were using the right number so we didn't make a mistake. But it is the right number. So in talking with the state, they really don't do they won't call it a reevaluation, but what they do is they look at their trends. And they, just looking at our trends, and both in terms of sales data and everything related to it, they felt that we were, I'm not saying artificially low, but they felt that our 0.73 and 1.4 were low. And why they won't say it's an adjustment, they feel that it's just a correction in terms of how they did their evaluations, and that brings that back up to that 4.21%, which to me was very significant. But again, that's what drives that negative tax rate, which from our standpoint is good news for the taxpayers, but I just want to explain why there was such a significant change. Any questions on the sheets?
Another question? So then for the county clerk, it's up 21%. And I see there's also a cost adjustment there too. Looks like $5,000 increase from our last time that we had looked over this. And what is, I know that there's obviously election coming up there. Is that a raise or what is
No,
That'd be the health insurance.
the insurance too?
health insurance.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the elections, but then the health insurance?
We did get a document on this with the health insurance is going up, correct?
Correct, that finance.
Because that wasn't matching
Correct.
mine on my notes.
So
Correct.
after finance, we had it built in with the increase of the health insurance, but then we went back and we allocated to each individual department. In the general fund, we had it as a lump sum, what the increase would have been for the health insurance, but then we had to go back to make this correct. We had to go back and reallocate it to each individual department. So that's why you're going to see a different number than what was at finance.
Right, I know, understand that, but my number of what I got from finance said this wasn't matching that specific area. The other ones were.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So let me just do some fun items, just because Steve put so much work into it, so I would feel good if I at least didn't point out some of the stuff that I think might be of interest. So if you have your budget book, I'm just going to refer to that just for a second. So this book, or it's going to be on your Zoom, if you have it open or not. But again, and if not, you don't have it in front of you, maybe just take some notes. Some things that I think would be of interest if you want to put yourself to sleep or if you're interested in numbers. But some items that I think would be of value to you, just to watch some trends, would be the net new construction on page 16. I think that's valuable just so you can kind of see how we're trending as a county in terms of our net new construction. And again, the net new construction is what drives our budget in terms of what we can spend in additional funding in the future. The next item of interest would be the equalized value chart on page 20. Again, that one, oh, sorry.
Can I ask you a question regarding that?
Sure.
New construction. How does the state or whoever figure that out? Because if you got a town, village, or a city or the county or whoever, and there's massive development or growth going on, and there's $20 million or $30 million in new buildings put up, is that a direct correlation between what's pumped in money-wise to the equation that determines this? Or how does that balance? Because
Correct, it's a percent. So actually, it's what's based really off building permits that are submitted in to the municipalities. And what they do is they capture those building permits, and usually on those permits, they have a projected value that's on those, and those are submitted. And that's how they start to generate the calculations for the percent new construction.
it just always seems low, like it should be more. I mean, if everybody knows that the economy's booming and there's construction like crazy going on and there's tens of millions of dollars in new homes being built and whatnot, why those numbers aren't higher? It just seems askew to me. Always has.
One of the comments I can make in reference to those building permits is that the cost of construction, not necessarily assessed value,
Correct.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
and whether or not the applicant actually supplied honest information.
Yeah, I hear you.
You said percent of the building. What's the percent of the net new construction? I mean, obviously that number doesn't represent, as Joel said, the whole. So what's the percentage they,
If you go on page 16 of the packet, you'll see the equalized value from 18, and then they have the net new construction, for example. If you're looking at, let's just take a look at Bailey's Harbor. And it shows you an additional $6 million there,
yeah.
and there's a ratio between that that gives you that 1.22%.
And really, you're allowed to raise it by the dollar value, just that they're showing a percentage, correct? So in the
That's what it equates to in essence, yeah.
So in case of Bailey's Harbor, you're increasing your budget based on the 6.0657, not the 1.22%.
So, okay.
Is the state the one that determines those
Yes.
directly? I mean, they do the homework, the legwork, and they figure out that, oh,
Yep.
this is what it should be?
Yep, we have no say in that.
The municipalities report the values to the state.
Correct. Next item of interest in my mind would be if you go to page 20, just to show you a trend. The one thing I thought that was interesting on that chart, if you look with the, I guess, equalized value being adjusted to that 7.4 billion, this is the first time that we have actually hit a new, I guess I consider high in terms of our value since 2008 and 9. So I thought that was pretty significant, just as a trend to point that out. Go 2 more pages. Just one thing to point out then is our tax rate. You can see that we had a trend of where we were growing. And now we're also, at the last 2 years, you'll see that we're kind of, I guess, curving back and settling back in. And that's going to be the impact of the tax levy. In other words, we're starting to hit that wall. And that's where we're at. So you're going to see that trend when I get into it. You're going to see that continue to kind of curve back in terms of our tax rate. Another just an item of interest, I always find it interesting, this on page 24, it gives you how the budget is broken out by our primary functions. So for example, our public safety area accounts for 37% of our expenditures as a county. But I thought it's a nice breakdown in terms of our operations, just to understand how and where your tax dollars are being used. That's the other ones I'll just point out. I don't think we need to jump to every one, but if you're interested in knowing what our approved CIP projects, that's on page 73. I know that's always a question that individuals ask, are what are our approved CIP projects? The only thing I'll point out on that is that there is the $100,000 that was added for the LED lighting project. Likewise, then on page 76, we have the general outlays by department. I know that's one question that's always asked. And again, that's there as a resource for the county board to have in the background. The other item I find of interest is on page 80. It's our highway roadwork schedule. I think that's nice to point out because it does show what our planned projects are Although the Highway Committee does each year go back and review those projects and can change the priorities, but that's what's our intended projects at this point in time. The one thing I'd like to point out on that chart as well, though, it also does provide the number of linear miles that we're trying to do. So for example, we're looking at doing 17.15 miles, which is kind of our sweet spot in terms of what we're trying to do each year in terms of making sure we maintain our county facilities. So that's a good number to be at. And then this, the last one, as far as interest, is the sales tax. That's on page 86. Again, that's one of those where it's great, but it also can keep you up at night because you're wondering how well or how long this trend will go in terms of our growth. But again, it does have an impact in terms of our budget and how we do that. And again, what we did this year is we're still, I guess, being somewhat conservative, and we're budgeting $3.75 million in terms of our sales tax revenue. Again, anything above that is then applied to the, I guess, the following year. But again, it's one of those things where we got to be careful, because if we over project, then we're actually building a hole for ourselves. Okay, so let's jump into, I guess this is the last one, and let's just talk about where we are in our future. So I'd like to do is do the county budget model. That's we're going back to paper. And I tried to simplify that so that we can just kind of have a discussion of where we are and where we're heading in the future. So I kind of broke it down into just basic questions. So we have, what can we spend? Again, that refers back to that sheet that we started off with. It's the same numbers that matches that worksheet. So again, it just throws in the net new construction and everything related to it, but it gives us that what we can spend is at $30,326,420. Then we say, well, what are our trending expenses and revenues? I'm just grabbing the totals for you. So we have the funds that are needed, and where we are right now is our budget balances to zero. In other words, we are spending everything that we can potentially spend underneath the levy limit. So in essence, we can't spend anymore, and if we make any cuts to our budget, that goes to the good, but it also means that we're in the phase of where we use it or lose it. So in other words, if we have any surplus funds that we don't spend, again, because of the levy limit, that means we actually lose that money or that capacity in the future to use it in the future. So right now, the budget is built, we're up to the full limit, we're at a zero balance. So again, it just kind of shows you what it has on the tax rate and the levy rate. Again, you're seeing the tax rate actually going down, that negative 2.25, and then obviously the change in our overall levy, we went up about 1.87%. The things to point out in the model that I'm using, you can see the assumptions there in terms of the increases. I think they're pretty tight, but I'll just kind of go through how it affects the model in general. So again, the equalized value, again, remember we had that 4.21%. I don't see that continuing. The equalized value, I have it built in at 1% moving forward. Again, if it's higher than that, in essence, what it means is that our tax rate actually goes down. So that's your impact in terms of that. Our operational, I built in at 1%. I think that's kind of conservative on the low side. But again, I have it built that way. With the wages, I have those locked in at a 2% increase. Again, we're aging the plan this year, but moving forward in the model, I have it locked in at 2%, and we're actually pretty close to that if we look at our trends in terms of how we control our cost. Capital improvements, I have at 1%, and revenues are at 0%. So what does that mean moving forward? If you look then at 2021, all things being equal, I build in that net new construction. So by adopting the budget today and assuming these assumptions, we are going to be about $180,000 short next year in our budget. Then in 2022, you see that jumps to the 495, 410. Now the thing that I wanted to point out is that it looks worse on that top line because it goes from like 4.95 to 814. But again, each year we got to balance the budget. So it's building on itself. So you have to actually look at the line below it. So our yearly shortfall for next year is going to be that 183. But then after that, you actually can see that we're trending about 312 to about 325, in essence, in the hole moving forward in terms of our budget, assuming these models and assumptions. So we're at that wall, and we can't do any more spending, so this is something that we need to watch and move forward. So one of the things as far as the county board, because I thought about it, and one of the questions might be, well, what do we do about that? Obviously, we'll need to look at how we do our expenses, but there's certain things that I think we can do as the county board and also our departments. And things that we need to watch. Obviously, to me, one is our insurance. If we get hit by insurance again, that's a $500,000 hit that we had this year. That's a huge impact on us. So that's something we definitely want to watch and have on our radar. Obviously, our expenses, that 1% is a huge impact on our operational. The closest we can keep that at zero, the better off we are in terms of our operations. But again, that's not entirely practical. Just obviously fuel increases and everything else relates to it. The revenues, if we can increase our revenues, right now we have a budget at zero. If I can just get a 1% increase in our revenues, so when you're at your committee levels and you're saying, okay, let's look at our revenues, one of the questions I hope you'd ask is, have you guys looked at your revenues and how can we increase them? So any types of fees that we have in terms of our revenues, if I can increase that by 1%, that takes that 183 down to 20,000 in terms of being short. So a 1% increase in our revenues is about $150,000 translation back to our, I guess what I consider the deficit moving forward.
Ken, that
Yes.
1%, you're talking across the boards for the county as a whole, not
Correct.
individuals.
Correct.
What is that number, 1%? Is that $1 million annually? Is it 300,000 or?
Well, if you look at our revenues, there's about $50 million in revenue, so if you do 1% of the 50 million,
Okay.
so. Yes,
Historically, the new construction has been under 2%, hasn't it?
correct.
I think before the legislators this year was that they were going to raise, so you could either or take 2% or the new construction. And since we've been historically under the 2%, I think we should contact our legislators to try to get that 2% in there. And you could take either or, and that's one way.
Correct.
I can't believe why they would say we're wrong, and we could work that through the committees here and approach not Sabota. That's going back. Anyway, approach those guys for raising the 2% or new construction.
Yep, I agree. So I guess any questions on the budget model? Okay, that kind of gives you a picture where we're at. So just before we adjourn, I just want to walk you through this, but we'll talk it through step by step. But there are two changes to the budget, and we'll get into them, but I just want to point them out right now so we can discuss them. The first one is that we were awarded a TAD grant for $141,000. And again, that comes in as a grant, but we would need to amend the budget. And there's a resolution on it that you're going to accept the grant. But when we get to the budget itself, we'll re-adjourn, but when we get to the budget, we'll need two motions. One would be to accept the funding for the TAD grant, and we have that written out as the motion, as we'd like to see it, and we can kind of talk about that. And then the other one is going to be, what they did is on our, you see all my sheets, you'll saw everything I said was like 1.16%, our net new construction. So thanks to Steve, normally we would have done this all the way through, but he actually checked the state worksheet. So everything we got from the state was always 1.16. Well, we got one of the worksheets we fill out, and it said 1.156. So they carried out an additional decimal point. So that affected our spending by $977. So we need to fix that within our budget. So when we get to that portion of the budget, we'll need that second motion as well, just to make sure we balance the budget at zero. But I guess that's the end of the presentation on the budget portion. Oh, sorry. Oh.
John? Go ahead.
Yeah, I got a question. I don't know which meeting I'm supposed to ask it. But, Ken, Whitford, if we stayed within our levy limit at 27 million and then exceeded by 3 million, what would our tax rate be?
There you go.
Exceeded by 3 million?
So, well, we went outside the levy limit and added an extra 3 million with the emergency services. And our levy limit was 27 million, right? And we went outside of our levy limit to 3 million. So if we was stayed at the 27 and didn't exceed our levy limit, what would the tax rate be?
You're going to add on about 41 cents to the tax rate if we went over 3 million. That's assuming you had authority. So I just want to clarify, we can't go over what we're spending right now, but if we would say, did a referendum to say we're going to increase our spending by $3 million.
No, I think we're going the opposite direction
Okay.
here. Our levy limit is 27 million, right?
30.
No, 30 million, that's including EMS, ain't it?
Yes. It's the 27, 123, 141,
Take
correct.
the EMS out, because
Yes.
that's
Above it.
going around it.
Correct.
So if we had just stuck to the levy limit of 27, what would our tax rate be?
You can take off about 43 cents
43 cents.
Per thousand.
per thousand, yep.
Okay. That's, so the people know what they're paying for emergency services.
Yeah, because a penny is about 74,000, or it's about 75,000. So you just take that 3 million divided by the 75. It's approximate, because there's some stuff we do, but that's about approximate, right?
So they know what they're paying.
Yep. Linda?
Just going back to the spreadsheet for a minute.
Sure.
So, under general administration, other reserves applied, you said that actually came from the building and vehicle replacement fund, 689,000. Why was that not applied to capital projects funds? If you took it from building and vehicle replacement, why would that have not been applied to capital projects and thereby reducing the $4.7 million tax levy there?
So,
It actually does include some of it.
yeah. So there, in the capital projects, if there is reserves taken from building maintenance and other funds, reserves, it is decreasing in the capital projects. That tax levy right now that we're showing in the budget is including those projects that are being funded by other reserves.
But it was applied to the general administration category. So actually, you took, we're allocating funds of 688,000 plus 922,000 just to balance out general administration, correct?
So what you'll see is that 688 is actually probably applied. So you're seeing that as a revenue, but then it gets expensed in those other areas. So for example, part of that money is going to be expensed in the individual budgets for their vehicle replacements. And for example, the one part of it's going to be expensed, like let's say the LED lighting project, that'll be expensed under the facilities and parks budget as a project underneath there. Actually, no, it's a capital one.
It's a capital
That's a
project.
capital one, I'm sorry. So that actually gets expensed under the capital projects on the next page. So they actually, so if you go to like capital projects, that 1.412479, that actually includes some of that revenue actually from that 688. So we show as a revenue because it's coming in from a fund, but then it's also shown as a revenue of where it's expensed.
Okay, thank you.
Susan?
I almost hesitate to ask this because I'm not sure how to ask it. We've been watching the budget projections going forward, and so far, circumstances have changed to not make them as dire as we were afraid they would. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay, but looking forward, circumstances aren't always going to change to make this okay, and you don't know when they are. Are there things in the levy law or the laws that have been passed to change things, small tweakings, whatever, that would deal with some of these things going forward? I mean, Dan mentioned the thing about the proposal that's in the legislature now, but are there other things that we could ask WCA to work on? I mean, small tweaks here and there. We're not going to get that law thrown out anytime soon or easily, but maybe there are some other small things that would help our and other counties particular. Am I making any sense?
Yep. No, I know exactly what you're saying. I guess to me, one of the areas that would be something that the counties could probably all rally behind in terms of relief would be placements.
Oh,
And I just know that across the board, the placements are getting, well, one, because there's all the stuff going on with certain counties trying to build facilities and that state grant process they had set up last year, and some are doing it and some are not. But just in general, we're seeing the placements, the costs actually increase faster than the consumer price index, hands down without a problem. So, I mean, there's certain things I think that we can do, not only, for example, like lobby, let's say for the 2%, but even if we could get relief of saying, okay, if we have placements that could be outside the levy, because we have no control over that. I mean, again, Joe projected, I think, 4 placements or 5 placements this year. I think we're at 9. So with those, and again, it's not something that Joe did wrong in terms of planning. We're being fiscally sound. It's just that we have 9 placements, and we're required to deal with those, and we have no control over those expenses whatsoever. So again, and that's a huge impact. Again, we're probably looking at how much for those placements, Joe, this was additional 5. So that's a $300,000 hit to us, so.
Well, I guess my suggestion is that when the committees work and look for other revenue, maybe they could identify things like that and forward them on to legislative committee to go to WCA. I'm sure we're not the only ones hitting these walls.
Yep. Yes, Vinnie.
I have one that's, from what I'm understanding, the overall tax rate is decreasing
Correct.
because of what you explained. So is there effort we can put forward as a county board to explain that to the public as to possibly a levy override as a possibility, where the override isn't increasing the taxes, it's keeping it could still be decreasing because you would just have a rate that is not as reduced in explaining? I mean, that's a difficult thing to answer or to put out there, but if the tax rate is being reduced, but the need is going up, it feels like the best way we can explain that to the public so they understand the concept would be helpful.
Correct.
Yeah.
And again, that's, again, if you look at our tools as far as how we can deal with this in the future, obviously there's, I guess, changing the existing rules, whether we look at the levy limit or trying to get some things outside of the levy limit. Our tools that we have as a county really to exceed the levy limit are very limited at this point in time. The really only way that we have it right now would be, for example, would be a referendum in that case. The only thing I can say is we mentioned it before when we did our retreat. Referendums are tricky in that they have to be with a set number and a specific purpose. So it's one of those things where, like for example, we talked about transportation. If we would do transportation, you could do that, but then that only gives you that solution for that portion of the budget for that period of time. So you get that relief initially, but eventually you're still going to come back and hit that wall again. So, and again, with us, we're about $300,000 a year where that will come back up to us, so. Definitely a tool, though. Yes, Biz?
Isn't assessment an ongoing thing for many taxpayers? And if you're assessed and your value goes up, then your tax rate, will not experience this going down, that will go up too.
Yep.
I think that's a fair statement, that because assessment, not for everybody, but for some people, they get it assessed and their value goes up. So then even though our rate shows that they may have a decrease in tax, they may have an increase if their
values went up.
If their values went up.
Correct.
Well, what Biz is saying is what the state does when they set the equalized for each municipality. So new construction is included in there when the assessor does his report to the state, and then, but they determine equalized for each municipality. So our rate may be going down, but it doesn't mean the individual's taxes are going down at all.
Correct. It depends on their situation, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Anybody else? Linda?
I'm just kind of curious, on the model, it shows, why do you anticipate that, so looking from 2020 to 2025, as expenses is going down along with revenues, I don't see our expenses going down. It's not much, it's $5 million, but.
So again, on the expenses, it all depends on, okay, the way the model is built right now, I take out things that we're applying as far as cash balances. So right now, we're showing that $81 million, correct? Mm-hmm. So, but a lot of that is we're drawing one-time expenses. So I'm actually spending $1 million to create that fund. So that's not really what I consider yearly expenditure. So you have to actually build that back out of the model, otherwise you have it overinflated. So that comes down respectively both on your revenues and expenses. So you'll see that your expenses went down, but you also see that the revenues went down, kind of matching that. So what I'm trying to do is you're trying to take out those one-time expenditures that you have in there and then focus on your true costs moving forward. So that's kind of why that happens. It adjusts on both your revenue and expense side. Again, and the one thing that you're seeing, I guess, Linda, one thing that you're picking up on it, which is true, you'll see from 2022 to 2023, there's a change in our expenses, about that 800,000. That's a shift in our debt expense. So our debt comes off for our 2015 debt, and then our debt actually goes back up for our 2017, but it's still a little bit of a shortfall. I mean, it's not as much as what we're spending on our debt ratios. So we're paying off our 2015 debt in 2022.
Well, I just question it because with wages going up and the cost of benefits going up and are acquiring more buildings and the like, I just don't see expenses going down.
Yep, I agree with you. Cool, all right.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Okay, I think we need a budget, not a budget, we need a motion to adjourn our budget meeting.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second it.
Oh, and you wanted to reconvene into our regular
Yeah.
meeting?
Yeah, there you go.
That was in my
I
motion.
was gonna go,
Caught it quicker, though.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're now reconvening back as the county board. Since we were just talking about the budget, we will slide down to Resolution 2019-72, the 2020 budget and tax levy.
So for the budget, we actually have the updated resolution on your desk that has the reflected rates, and then within that, it actually includes the acceptance of the TAD grant and also the adjustment of that 977. So I guess my recommendation, and Grant, you have to nod if you like this approach or not, but I guess it'd probably be better to have a motion on the floor to accept the amended resolution that's on your desk. But then what we will need to do, just for a documentation standpoint, is we want to, in essence, have a motion to accept the TAD grant and also a motion to adjust that 977, so that way it's for the record as amendments.
Yeah, and we need the amendments to be part of the record, but
Correct.
what you suggested is perfectly fine.
Dave, should we be doing resolution 2019-73, accepting the grant first, or it's not necessary?
In a perfect world, but I'm assuming if you vote to add it to the budget, you're going to adopt the resolution accepting the grant.
But it is on our agenda, so why don't you take it in order?
Yeah.
Agreed.
That's fine.
Okay, that's fine. All right, let's go back up to Resolution 2019-73, approval of Wisconsin DOJ TAD grant to the Health and Human Services Department. Helen?
I make a motion that the Board of Supervisors approves the acceptance of the grant valued at $141,011. And there is some attached paperwork, and also Joe is here if there are any questions. This is, TAD is the Treatment, Alternatives, and Diversion, which is kind of known as the treatment court that is part of several different agencies within the county and also out of the county. And it is part of the process of getting the treatment court up and running. So I don't know if Joe has anything he wants to explain or people have any questions for him.
I'll second
that motion.
Joe? Good morning.
morning. So just as some background for the TAD grant, this has been kind of a group effort between the judge, district attorney's office, sheriff's department, our department, lots of ancillary outside people that are involved in the court system as well. This grant is for us to try and develop and start a drug court or a treatment court, which will eventually start with drug offenders, potentially going to mental health clients, and up the line as we figure out one piece at a time. So this is an implementation grant. It's funding to help us continue to move forward in getting this done. It also provides some funding for a coordinator for that position. There is a matching fund requirement, but we were allowed to use what was already built into our 2020 budget as those matching funds. So we don't need additional tax levy to receive this money. We're able to use some of my expenses, other expenses that were already built into our budget. I could talk about it for days, but if you have questions, I'm glad to answer those.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Yep.
Anybody else? That will go to the voter board.
It's my turn.
That is passed on a vote of 21 yes, 0 no. Okay, now we'll go to the budget. Resolution 2019-72.
I'll make a motion that we accept the resolution number 2019-72 that's amended, that's been on our desk.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We still need to go through the amendments, correct?
Correct. Took it, these two.
So if we could just have a,
We got these two.
yeah, have a motion for each one of the amendments, and then we'll do a total vote on the resolution at the end.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer an amendment to the 2020 proposed budget to amend the Door County's 2020 proposed budget to include the TAD grant, increasing Health and Human Services Department budget revenues and expenditures by $141,011, bringing the department's total department's revenues to $7,733,249 and expenditures to $11,459,757 with no change to the tax levy.
I'll second that.
Second. Any discussion or questions? So we'll go to the voter board.
They made a motion, you made a motion. So we got two motions.
This is the motion for the amendment.
This is a
Right.
motion for the amendment.
Right, but they made a motion to pass the budget, now you got a motion on top of a motion.
Oh, sure.
No, this is a motion to amend.
To amend.
Okay, I know what he said, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes.
Clerk's not ready.
That is passed on a vote of 21 yes, 0 no.
One more amendment.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to offer another amendment to the 2020 proposed budget due to the rounding of the net new construction calculation, decreasing the overall tax levy by $977. The overall total 2020 proposed budget revenues will be $50,807,652, and the expenditures will be $81,134,072. The total tax levy being $30,326,420, and the tax rate will be 4.089413079 per thousand of equalized value.
There's a
Should
second.
add another decimal.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or discussion on that one? That will go to the voter board. This passes a vote of 21 yes, 0 no. Thank you. Okay, so now we'll go back and vote on the amended budget. Correct. There's no other questions. We'll go to the voter board. That's passed 21 yes, 0 no.
Good job, everybody.
Good job, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Everybody gets to start over next month, right?
There you go.
Okay, back up in resolutions. Resolution 2019-74, support of Inside application for broadband expansion to Egg Harbor.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-74.
Second.
Any explanation?
Sure, can I just take a moment? I'm going to talk about both of these. So as you're aware, we worked very hard to try to get increased funding for the state broadband grants. And this year they have $24 million allocated for this cycle, which actually expires on December 19th in terms of the applications. And then there's another $24 million next year. As part of the process, there's obviously the grant application, but then there's obviously letters of support, letters or resolutions of support. And with that, they do look at in terms of local government involvement, both in terms of support, but also financial contribution. So in the past, we have done this in terms of financial contribution, and you'll see on both of these resolutions, we're proposing contributing $5,000. But I do want to just kind of quickly go through that. I'm aware of, in terms of my work with all the municipalities, there's going to be a total of 7 projects that are going to be submitted in for grants that we're aware of. There's 2 from Insight in terms of both Egg Harbor and Washington Island, and then there's going to be 5 more projects that are going to be submitted by Door County Broadband. And I know one of the questions is going to be is, well, how do we determine the level of funding for these projects? And again, what I'd like to do is, at least for today, is, again, we have those dollars specified, but I will, I guess, take a proposal to finance just to, I guess, get a general framework. What I'm looking at doing is looking at items such as potential cost, residents served, the total cost of the project, if the local government is involved, and also the type of infrastructure that's being proposed. And I just put together a little matrix that I'll probably take to finance, but we're looking at anywhere from $5,000 down to about $1,000 in terms of contribution. I guess if all of these grants, all the grants will be submitted, but they're all not going to be awarded. But let's just say we have the perfect trifecta and all the grants would win. I guess I'm looking up the funding for about $20,000 for the projects in terms of our contribution to each one of these. Again, what we would do is we'd actually take out of our general contingency for these 2 that are before you today, but even the other ones, if they go forward, we do the same thing. I think our involvement in these projects are critical in terms of the potential success of getting these grants as far as the awards through the PSC. And it's one of our priorities as far as one of our strategic initiatives is broadband. So again, I think the support is there, but I just want to give you 2 things. One is, obviously, I know there's other projects out there that I'm working on in terms of support, but also I'm trying to be fair in terms of how we're looking at the funding. So really quick, in terms of these 2 before you, the Egg Harbor project is one of those where Mick is here from Insight, but I'm very pleased to announce that they're actually looking at using Egg Harbor as one of the pilot projects for projects that they might use across the state as a model. Very exciting in terms of what they're hoping to do. In essence, with that grant, they're hoping to, in essence, twofold. Is one is increase capacity. And by increasing capacity, that means, like, if you go to the festivals or something like that, you'll get your phone service and just kind of see it spinning. The idea would be is that you're not going to have that going on. It depends how many people are here, but again, that will greatly reduce that impact in terms of our capacity. Also, reliability within the village itself, but the other thing too is that with this technology, in essence, Egg Harbor could be one of those communities where they actually have broadband access through the main corridor that's available for the public, which would be pretty amazing. And it'd be one of the first communities that I know of that actually provides that in Wisconsin. So that's a really neat potential project. And again, the Village of Egg Harbor is very excited, and they did pass that unanimously as well. The second one, I think it's pretty clear, Jim brought it up, but this for Washington Island, obviously they ran the fiber, if you remember, where they buried that with the power line. But again, there's a gap from where they ran that project to where the existing fiber actually terminates. So it's nice to have it, but without that final connection or link, there's no value to it. So in essence, that this grant for Washington Island is actually to make that connection, and then also some of the additional infrastructure on Washington Island itself. So both of them are very critical in terms of their what they're providing in terms of services, but I think they're very, very exciting, and I also appreciate Insight working with all the to kind of bring this together. So I don't know if Mick, you wanted to add anything, or?
Yeah, just to echo what Ken said, we're thrilled to be working with Door County on strengthening broadband service in the county. The Washington Island project is particularly exciting for me because we won a grant, in the last round for that project to put in the submarine fiber. That's done now. The submarine fiber runs from Northport Pier under the water to Plum Island. It goes across Plum Island along with the electrical cable, and then underwater from Plum Island to Lovedale's Point on Washington Island. This project will connect that with our existing fiber infrastructure, which ends at Gills Rock. So it'll go from Gills Rock to Northport Pier. It's a 2.2-mile fiber build. It's as fiber build in Door County is expensive. That's an expensive leg. And then from Lovedale's Point, it'll run through the island up to Washington Island Tower. Again, that's a very exciting build there because it's going to go past all of the community anchor institutions, which are all on the same street. So it's really, really appropriate there. So it'll pass the clinic, it'll pass the school, it'll pass the admin building, and of course the co-op. There's fiber at the co-op already, so we're going to connect into the fiber at the co-op, and then automatically, the school, the clinic, the admin building, and we'll see a kind of a really good improvement in service. And then also, should Frontier decide to join in on this, we can connect into Frontier as well. Their office is also right on that road. And then the fiber will continue on to Washington Island Tower. We're also looking at a fixed wireless component to this project. We haven't decided exactly how that's going to look yet. Certainly, we're looking at a strengthening service at Washington Island Harbor. And then also, we're looking at some fixed wireless component as well in Liberty Grove. We haven't decided exactly how that's going to look yet. Probably by the end of the week we'll know that. But that project very exciting. So to complete that project, we'll strengthen that kind of middle mile infrastructure out to the island. The Egg Harbor, I think, is one of the most unique projects going to the PSC for funding this year. It's a combination of, just as Ken said, strengthening the wireless mobile infrastructure in the public areas in Egg Harbor. It's also got a Wi-Fi component to it. And this will help tourists in particular. And Egg Harbor and many of your towns experience a huge increase in transit population during the summer, tourists. And they're always on their phones, and they're looking for stuff. They're looking for places to eat. They're looking for, boat landings and everything. And so this will provide them with a really improvement in service, as Ken said. So that's a really cool project. And we have to structure that application so that we're providing the service to Egg Harbor. And so I was just kind of making notes on that here, and it's really neat because, as Ken said, we already have a fiber infrastructure going through the town. Insight is on the poles running through the town, so it makes that easy. So, supporting the resolution, supporting the financial component of the resolution strengthens the application that we present to the Commission. The PSC will fund applications that have stronger matching funds. And so these two are kind of critical projects in my mind for Door County, and we really appreciate your support on them.
Thank you. Dave?
Question, as all of us know that are here, there are 2 municipalities called Egg Harbor. One of them is the town of Egg Harbor, where I reside. The other one is the village of Egg Harbor, which I represent as a county board member. So I routinely bring this up. What part of Egg Harbor are we talking about?
So for the end site, we're looking at primarily where the fiber runs. So that'll be from, in essence, what I consider the municipal center coming down the hill, and it runs all the way up past, I guess, their village, or the village hall. It turns down Double E, and they can extend with some of the project a little bit further north, but that's the main corridor that they'll be able to cover for that project. We did look at some potential of extending it into the town, and we actually had the town board chairman was there in terms of some of the discussions. We don't think the technology will hit much to the town in that standpoint, but I do know that the town of Egg Harbor is also working with DC Broadband on an application that'll be included as part of this.
I'm aware of that as well. It's just that the clarification, I get the calls, I'm sure Randy would get the calls,
Yep.
that people are thinking we're talking the town of Egg Harbor as well, and we clearly are not.
Correct.
Susan?
Can you speak about the relationship of these projects and this fiber that we have, that Insight has installed, and what we heard at Public Safety yesterday with regard to additional towers to help our public safety? Is there any relationship to them? Forgive my technological ignorance, because I don't totally understand it, but is there any connection to them?
Well, the only connection is the fiber that Insight has. We actually did a partnership with the fiber that runs throughout the county, so we're relying on that fiber for our public safety network. We do have, in relation to the discussion yesterday, we do have some of our equipment on some of the towers that we share, not we share, but that Insight owns or other entities own. What we're seeing is on those towers where they get filled up, there's interference. That's, I guess, eroding the signal, and eventually at some point in time we'll probably have to have towers independent of those towers.
Ellen?
At Economic Development yesterday, they had a breakdown, like in Egg Harbor, of, the county is putting in this much, the village, or the village is putting in this much, Insight is putting in this much, and then there's the state grant. It might be interesting. I can't remember exactly what those numbers were, but I thought that was interesting because it showed, the percentage that the county is putting in is actually pretty small compared to. So I don't know if you have those numbers, Ken.
Sure, and these are just estimates. So Egg Harbor is about a $700,000 investment that's being made by Insight. Both the village and the county would be contributing towards that small amounts. We're looking at $5,000 from the county, and I think the village is looking at $10,000. So again, out of that, that's a pretty small percentage. Washington Island, again, we do a $5,000 contribution. I know the town already has made contributions towards other parts of the aspect of the project, but I know that's going to be probably $1 million plus.
Yeah, so, the PSC, generally they prefer not to fund 100% of a project. So we're not going to get 100%. What we look for is they look for matching support, because if you provide matching funds, that strengthens the application. In this case, the Washington Island project is critical infrastructure. They were down for 9 days just this past month. And so, the microwave connection that supports the frontier service on the island went down. There's other microwaves on there as well. There's a microwave that supports the Cellcom tower. And I believe there's at least one other microwave. But the frontier microwave went down. And so all service to the school was lost. All service to the admin building was lost. And all service, to critical community anchor institutions was lost. And so we see that as a critical project. And we see that, that the PSC also sees it as a critical project. They actually contacted us and asked us if we're applying. So, we see ourselves putting funding towards that project, as we did towards the first leg of the project, the submarine fiber. But we see ourselves requesting a bigger percentage of that project from the PSC in terms of the amount. Egg Harbor is such a kind of exciting, unique project. You know, I could go into some requirements in the grant funding round. I won't do that, but suffice it to say that we would probably be requesting at least probably 50% of that project from the PSC in terms of cost. And then Insight will fund the portions that the village and the county don't fund. So that's usually how it's made up. We don't have exact numbers yet in terms of how much it will cost. Our engineering department is still putting together that numbers. But I think it's accurate to say that, you know, Egg Harbor is around 700,000. Washington Island will easily exceed $1 million. It's a big, big project. It's an infrastructure project that's critical to the islands.
So is this kind of a, I guess the way we could look at developing the other villages and towns in the county then, that this would be kind of this kind of, you know, you had mentioned county contribution, and the county contribution really is not very large compared to the whole project amount, I guess is kind of what I was getting at. But then this is the type that would be going forward in maybe 2021 for other areas?
So again, for this, what I'm proposing, again, we have the two before you today. There'll be 5 more that I know that DC Broadband is going to do, and I can run those through both, in essence, a letter of support in trying to do that, but I'm going to run it through the Finance Committee to get that authorized, and it'll still come through County Board. But yes, we're looking at, again, I put together like a little matrix, but I have like an idea. It ranges between like $1,000 to $2,500 contributions for the other projects.
Just a kind of question too off of what our Supervisor Cohout was saying, perhaps Mr. Cook could fill in too. So if this is secured a secured Wi-Fi, then would public safety be able to tap into that with those cell phone uses from communications and stuff that we had on a report yesterday at public safety?
John? If I can jump in here?
Sure, please.
The difference for the rest of the county board members is we talked about a FirstNet system yesterday at public safety, and that's a whole separate component, I believe, than what we're talking about with Insight here. The FirstNet system requires a new cell phone for all first responders. As I understand it, they're paying 99 cents per phone. Ken can back me up on that, which allows them to, it's not replacing critical infrastructure, it gives them another tool in their toolbox to use in areas that we have really poor coverage around the bluff areas. They put out kind of a matrix yesterday where their tower is on an AT&T tower, but it's through Insight. The different coverage areas and how it works out better. The Sheriff's Department, Fire Department, EMS, and all of our other emergency services have tested this system out for the FirstNet, and they are very impressed with the coverage that they have received and the speed for which it operates under as well. But it really doesn't tie into the Insight project as I'm understanding it.
Yeah, probably on Washington Island, some of the backhaul will end up on the fiber, so it'll provide
Correct.
You know, better service on backhaul. Also, over time, it's possible that FirstNet will kind of fall back if the AT&T goes down. That it'll fall back. But yeah, it's separate.
Correct. It's not a cure-all system.
No.
I have one just on like general education and background, because I get quite a few questions from people in my area as far as what does it mean for construction of new towers in the county, not pro or against, but you know, a project like this, is it increasing number of towers, placement of towers, is it?
Sure. So for the two that are being proposed by Insight in this case, Washington Island, that's a fiber project, so it's not additional towers for that one. For Egg Harbor, there's going to be some attachments of, I would consider almost like the size of a toaster that you might see in a lamppost or on the side of a building, but there's no, I guess at this point in time, no additional towers. There might be an additional lamppost, but it's not the traditional tower you're thinking of. For the other projects that are in the towns, yeah, you're looking at, I would not consider them a cell. If you're looking at the large towers, like a cell phone tower, but you're looking at a small tower-type structure that ranges anywhere from 100 to 190 feet for some of these projects that they're looking at doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question about funding. We've heard mentioned the PSC, that's the Public Service Commission. Is that, do we know how much of that money that, is that all state money, or is there some federal program money coming through the PSC? I'm just wondering if we have any sense of federal versus state money on where this, funding is coming from.
I believe it's all state money. Yeah, it's all
state.
Public Service Commission. It was part of the budget process. And there's actually a total of 48 million that they've allocated to it. That's how much they value this program. And so this round is 24 million. And there will be future rounds. They're expecting another grant round sometime next summer. And that'll either be another 24 million, or they may break it up and make it 2 rounds of 12 million. So let's say these projects don't get funded in this round, we would resubmit. We would update them and strengthen the applications and resubmit in the next round. And so that's what we actually did with Washington Island. And it worked pretty well. So yeah, it's state money. There is a federal program as well. But the federal program comes with a tremendous amount of regulations, and so this program, it's really very targeted. It's strengthening broadband infrastructure in the state, and so it's a much better fit for us and for you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? If not, we'll go to the voter board.
We're voting on just the Egg Harbor one right now?
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
That is passed on a vote of 20 yes, 1 no. Resolution 2019-74, support of inside application for broadband expansion grant for Washington Island. Joel?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would excitedly request that we approve Resolution 2019-75, expansion grant for application broadband for Washington Island.
Mr. Chairman, I'll excitedly second that motion.
Any discussion? Questions? If not, we'll go to the voter board. Passed on a vote of 21 yes, 0 no. All right. Did the budget. Take care of the truck. We're going to take a break momentarily. I just want to do the truck chassis quick. Tank and snow equipment. John?
I move for approval of Resolution 2019-76.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? We'll go to voter board.
Ellen, she's working on it.
Oh, no, we don't. That's passed the vote of 21 yes, 0 no. Resolution 2019-77, purchase of truck chassis, dump body, and snow equipment for the Highway Airport Department. John?
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of Resolution 2019-77.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? If not, we'll go to the voter board.
Not working.
Push it.
Push it low. There you go.
That's passed with a vote of 21 yes, 0 no. We will take a 10-minute recess.
guys.
There was no question on that.
My sister's all worried that they're.
I mean, they advertise.
We're paying attention in the front row here, gentlemen.
We sure are.
All right. Glad to see
The
it.
farmer next door.
Everybody's sucking on mints and chocolate, right?
Yeah. Minty.
Okay, we have some real logistical nightmares coming up here. We'll figure this all out though. So we're going to reconvene back into our board meeting, and now we're immediately going to recess into the Door County Fair Association.
All right.
Huh?
Need a right here.
We have to vote on that?
Your young man when you came in, he turned gray.
Okay, we'll call the annual meeting of the Door County Fair to order. You guys should have all received the agenda. I'll look for a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Bear with me, I'm a one-man show here, so I got to write. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. The minutes were attached in your packets. You all should have time to review it. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion was made and second to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Presentation of annual reports. Again, those were all in your packet. First one is the financial report. We'll look at the statement of activities. Our total revenue was slightly up. It was $242,397.94. You'll notice that a couple things were down in that, which was, our county of Door, the month that you funded is down. The advertising and donations was down. Our gate receipts went up. That was due to a price increase that we approved for last year's fair. Our space and privileges were down. So mainly the increase in our revenues was based on our gate intake. Expenditures, items of note, our advertising and marketing was up considerably. We spent about another $3,500 there. And then our special acts and features was up considerably due to the cost of the carnival increase and some other entertainment cost overruns. So our total expenditures were $226,728.52 for a profit of the fair $15,741. Going to the next page, you'll see that our exhibitor passes were down slightly, about 20. Our daily passes were down about 1,500. Our booster button sales was up slightly, and our total attendance last year was down about 1,300. A lot of that was due to the year before that we had Hatco comes in and does their company picnic of about 1,100, 1,200 people. So that's the financial report. Does anybody have any questions of the report that I did not highlight? Hearing none. Oh, go ahead, Linda.
Could we encourage other companies to have their picnic
We try.
at the ground?
We do try.
Put the word out there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Just a couple questions. Looking at the expense and more description starting on page, I guess 8, and it goes down into more details. Wages per hour, so there's quite a bit for individualizing, setting up for the pre-fair setup, morning cleanup, gates, grandstand. What is the going rate typically per hour for hiring help or volunteer? If it's a volunteer, I understand it might be going to an organization.
Yep. Yep. It depends on the age or the amount of work that those workers do or what type of work they're doing.
Okay.
We have a staff that is the main setup staff and the main tear down staff. They obviously make some more money than, say, the kids that are picking garbage and that kind of stuff. I don't have that hourly rate that goes out, but I'm guessing it's somewhere in that $15 to $20 range. So.
Okay.
Any other questions? Not, I'll entertain a motion to accept the financial report.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made and second to accept the financial report. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. In your packet as well is the premium list detailed, the paid out by division. This comes out of our new software, so it's a little bit more broken out than what you guys have seen in the past. But you'll see that there's open fare and the junior fare premiums paid. I believe the premiums paid was pretty status quo to the year prior, so.
I'd just like a comment on this. I do believe different from last year to this year is that they were paid right when they were leaving and picking up their exhibit versus mailing out, which
Yes.
saves some money.
Yes,
Correct.
it did save some money. Our new software has the capabilities of, we're going into more of an online type program that the judges can register the placings right away, and we can pay them out on Sunday afternoon before they leave. So that saves us a lot of postage and whatnot.
Thanks.
So I'll look for a motion to approve the premium list report.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Where was the second? Helen? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Oral comments, I guess, again, we had a great year as far as our attendance. We had a lot of positive comments this year. I really like to thank you guys, our oversight committee, and Wayne for the improvements that happened at the fairgrounds this year. Like I said, we had a lot of positive comments on how clean and all the positive comments as far as the direction of the improvements of the grounds out there. So that in a nutshell, with good weather and positive comments of our fair, there wasn't really a lot of highlights to this fair. It was just the fair again this year. So
They're good things.
yeah, no, we continue to try to build and try not to get into a stale, the entertainment. We got to try to keep that fresh, and hopefully this year we're looking at some different things and potentially try to gain some more viewers. Yep, Randy?
How'd the paved midway work out? Was there any issues at all with that?
No, it worked out excellent. So, yes.
Questions with feedback with the gates in the track. I heard some comments and feedback about that. Are we going to do anything different or improve on more people manning the gates, or?
Manning like the gates that coming in, or the
So
gates
people
to the
pay
racetrack?
when they come in, and making sure maybe buttons aren't getting swapped as much?
Yep, well, yes, so we rely heavily on volunteers, or, there's not a lot of selections that we can get when people apply to us. I mean, we rely on the same amount of, same people that come back basically year to year to do that work. There are times that people are getting in or getting around the system, and I guess they have to live with that, and we're never going to catch everybody at every point of access unless we spend a lot more money on security, I would assume. So, but we every year we try to address that issue, and hopefully we're making some grounds there.
Okay, good.
Okay. We'll move on to the fair updates for the 2020, or the fair dates for 2020 is July 29th through August 2nd. And then we'll move into, does anybody have any questions on the dates, or sounds good? Yes?
Actually, if I could go into a little bit more detail, what would be looking for the carnival start and stop, the times? Did you get that contract done yet?
Yes, that contract is complete, and the carnival start and stop times will be similar to what they were this year. They're exactly that way, except for Thursdays. Thursday's carnival time will be 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I believe.
Thursday at 3.
Yep. Is
Do you have Spectrum Entertainment on board for next year?
we have Spectrum on board for 2 years. They again, so last year they made a big jump. This year they went up slightly, but they committed to us to come back for 2 years. So from there, we'll see where it goes. But again, that's going to be our struggling factor is contracting with carnivals. So. Okay. Item number 6, we have the slate of proposed county fair board officers, fair officers. We'll open it up to nominations as well.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, we accept the nominations as presented here for the respective positions and close all other nominations and cast a unanimous vote.
Second.
In favor, by the way.
Are you sure you don't want your name on there, Ken?
I'm sure I don't.
Okay.
But thank you for thinking of me.
All right, so the motion was made to close nominations and cast a unanimous vote. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Questions and answers. Now's your chance to ask whatever you want. Maybe not whatever you want, you can ask. Ken, you got something?
Oh, we have to extend that finish line on the motorcycle races about maybe 5 yards. That girl would have smoked all the guys if she'd had that, just that little bit extra. That was a great race. That was good. And in case people don't know what I'm talking about, they had the motorcycle races, the family, we all went to it. The best race was in that 250 class. That one girl, she couldn't have been much more than, what, 12, 13 years old?
I don't know, I was at somewhere else on the
Okay,
ground at the time.
and she was handling that machine well. If she wouldn't have that one little slip early in the race, she started passing all the guys, and she just ran out of space. On that last lap, her brother beat her by about a wheel's length. That was it. It was entertaining.
Any other questions or comments? Right?
Yes, at the WCA, took in a breakout session on fairs. And we had 3 young ladies make their presentation and how their fair was so successful. And one of them was from Milwaukee County, one of them was Calumet County. And they were all in the marketing end of it. That was their degree. So I would strongly recommend that you talk to those counties, especially Calumet, as far as what they have done as far as using other media to advertise their fair. They were very, very enthusiastic about their fair, and things that we're doing, we're doing it right, but we could do more as far as getting out the word about our fair.
Yeah, we've actually had, and just to make a short comment on that, we've had actually other fairs comment, well, I want to know who was running our Facebook page, because they're literally seeing a Facebook page a year, once a week at least, and then leading up to the fair. So our fair is getting out and social media quite prevalent, so. Yes, Laura.
Just to go off of that too, then I'll have a question with that. And I'd like to also comment, those ladies speaking at WCA were all past fairs to the fair. So.
Yes, they were.
They were, yes. So going into that with the social media account, you contract with Tweak Social Media Marketing, and they get about a monthly payment from the fair. And what is that for? Just for Facebook posts, or what all social medias are they working?
Yep, we are on Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. They cover the gamut of the main used social media networks.
Could I ask, do they give you reports on
Yes.
maybe what's working better? And they've been with you for a couple years now. They may see this trend.
Third year with them, and they do give us annual reports, and they do like a biannual report, or every so often they'll come together with our.
On which accounts and maybe which ones they're doing. And is there a trend that they're seeing over the last 3 years that you recall that's one's doing better, one account?
I believe Facebook is the one that's getting the most touches or reaches. So, yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, we'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now reconvene back into our normal County Board Supervisor meeting. We will go to Resolution 2019-78, Door County Compensation Structure and Performance Incentives. Ken, do you want to, well, can we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve 2019-78, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Sure, so again, I covered this a little bit, part of the budget, but I'll go to a little bit more detail. Again, what we're looking at, and it's built into the budget, is actually aging our compensation structure. We're looking at aging at 3%. I did discuss this at the admin committee. This is one of those tough ones where we're trying to obviously balance our spending, but also trying to, I guess one of our priorities has always been is making sure that we keep or try to retain our employees and also remain competitive in the market. Based off the analysis done by Carlson Detman, who's our payroll consultant, they went through that process and recommended a 3% aging. So that's what's before you today in terms of the aging of the plan. Likewise, as we also have our pay per performance program, and this is, I believe, our 4th year of the program itself. And again, what that is when a employee hits their anniversary date, they get an annual evaluation done. And depending on where they fall within the pay plan, they can either qualify for a step increase if they're between the 85th percentile and the 100th percentile. And once they get above the 100th percentile, there is a percentage increase that they can also qualify for. And then once they get above the 115th percentile, then they actually get a what we consider a one-time bonus as part of their wage. What we're proposing for 2020 is to maintain the exact same level as we provided in 2019. And again, the thought process, again, with where we are fiscally, again, it's built into the budget. But again, from a philosophy standpoint, I guess our focus is on trying to make sure we remain competitive in terms of our employment and retention of our employees, and also recognize through the pay per performance people that excel in their performance and their duties in their job.
Questions? Alexis?
There was discussion in the budget presentation about increase to health insurance. How does the increase to health insurance for the employees compare with the 3% proposed aging?
It eats up most of that with the aging, I'll be honest. So so the question was our insurance increase. So again, if we recall, our insurance increase ended up being total on the total insurance was about 19%. We made some changes in our insurance plan, which took away some of that expense. In other words, we went from having to have your prescription mailed to you if you're on something that's recurring. So there's savings related to that. So in essence, we were able to get down what we increased on the employee and employer contributions around that 10% mark. So that's, but that's not 10% of their wages. It's 10% increase on what they're paying in terms of their premium. So in essence, like a family plan's about I'm looking at Kelly in the back, I'm just going to round the numbers, keep it simple, about $22,000. So you did about a 10% increase on that. The wage increase is, yeah, it's going to almost match out. So that's a very good point.
Anybody else? If not, we'll go to the voter board. That's passed a vote of 20 yes, 0 no. Resolution 2019-79, increase of hours, new positions, reclassification requests, and part-time pay rates for 2019 and 2020. Can I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2019-79.
Second.
Thank you.
So just really quick on this item, this is more, again, everything on this sheet was built into the budget. What it does is twofold. One is it documents our changes as an organization in terms of what we're approving in terms of positions, but also too, it actually allows Kelly then to actually update. We actually maintain a master org chart, you could say, of all active positions that are funded within the organization. And in essence, with passing this resolution, it actually documents what we're considering official positions of the county. The one thing to point out is there are obviously some positions that we add, which are considered tying to grant funding, and those are tracked as well as part of this process. So for example, under Health and Human Services, we have two where you'll see them designated as DTE. Those are actually positions that are tied to funding in terms of grants. Just one other quick comment. Likewise, if you go to page 2 of the attachment, it does also include our changes in our recommended and our part-time rates. And we do this every single year for all of our positions. And that's also included as part of this resolution.
Laura?
Comment. I said this one the first time it came through, but that was at committee level, so I'd like to say it again at the county board. With considering new positions, I just want to point out on page 18, when we look at our emergency services, we look at on-call EMT and on-duty EMTs. We don't specify or differentiate between an EMT and an advanced EMT. And I understand, and then there's also the paramedics, and I understand that, potentially here is not the place for that, but, utilizing them in their licensed capacities is interesting, and I think more useful to the actual staff. So as going forward and moving into 2020, I think that holds a good discussion, and I know Aaron had appreciated that comment also when I made that at that committee level, so thank you.
Anybody else? If not, we'll go to the voter board. Let's pass on the vote of 21 yes, 0 no. Resolution 2019-80, approving the formation of a 2020 Census Complete Count Committee. May I have a motion? I know I sponsored it.
I'll move to approve resolution number 2019-80, approving the formation of a 2020 Census Complete Count Committee.
Second.
All right, thank you.
So in the packet, we actually included, Jill and I met with a representative from the U.S. Census. Actually, if you went back to 2010, we're actually about 6 months behind of where they were in 2010 in terms of trying to get out the information in regards to the census. Again, if you're not familiar, every 10 years, the federal government completes the count. And again, they're trying to gear up for that. And what they have done with local communities is they go out and they look for working with a local unit of government to, in essence, establish a committee, and that committee would meet, I'm guessing right now, because we're under a short timeline, we'll probably meet 2 to 3 times, I'm guessing at the most, just to look at certain ways to promote individuals in terms of making sure that we do try to count as many individuals as possible. But again, we included it both in the packet as far as the overall message from the U.S. Census, but again, what we did in 2010 is we actually created a committee. There was, at that time, it was not any county board supervisors. Again, in working with David, I'm recommending maybe we have like 1 or 2 that would maybe participate in this committee. Again, we're looking at 2 to 3 meetings, but then also we try to get maybe some of the clerks involved throughout the county, or even some of the local, they have recommendations on some of the individuals we might target for committee. And to be honest, given the time frame, we'll take whatever we can get just to try to get the committee together and think of some ideas just to brainstorm in terms of trying to get people involved or at least understand what we're doing for the census. So I don't know if there's any questions. There is a timeline that's in the packet on page 32 of 74 of the overall packet. It kind of shows what they're hoping to do in terms of when they would start in terms of the count and how they conduct the U.S. Census. And again, that's on page 13 for their approximate timeline.
John?
What role would town clerks play in this if the county is going to get involved?
Again, what?
I can.
Oh, go ahead.
You stared at each other.
Yes.
Go ahead, Linda.
Having been the town clerk in 2010, I can tell you that we were sort of a collection point. We worked with our county clerk's office, and at least our town, because we did have an office building at the time, we were sort of a collection point. The volunteers or the paid volunteers that were part of the census collecting, the ones out collecting the data, kind of congregated at our town hall. And we just offered whatever assistance we could do for them. And I do agree with our administrator that we are about at least 6 months behind, because 10 years ago, this was out and about and everybody was aware of it. And also Governor Evers just appointed or signed an order for a complete count committee as well. So I'm sure we could reach out at the state level for informational brochures, packets, guidelines, so at least that's from my perspective, 10 years ago.
David?
Again, down my normal path. Line item 30 and 31 references to be it further resolved the committee members are entitled to compensation and so forth. Budgeting for that is from where?
Well, between now and when they're going to actually do the counts, it'd be under our existing rules, so we'll take it out of, if we have representation from the county board, it'd be taken out of the county board budget. Likewise, if we authorize the committee and we authorize this as part of the payment for those committee members, we'd probably charge it to the county board account.
Susan?
I was just going to add to John's question. The last complete count committee, his wife was on it, as I recall. Joanne, as a clerk, was one of the people on the committee, so they can also serve.
She never showed me her check.
We did not get paid. We did not get paid. It was volunteer, was it not?
It's the same resolution.
Oh,
They could have submitted, but they chose not
I
to.
didn't get paid.
We chose not. You chose not to.
Oh, okay.
You may not have actually made the choosing, though.
No, actually, I think that's right, because on the committee were some clerks and Jill, and Stephanie Reinhardt, and Joanne, and Pam Kroll, I think, and 2 citizens, Shirley Centerigi and I, and we did it as members of League of Women Voters, so we did not take the money for it. That's true, I remember it now.
Joe? Just a question I got after reading the resolution is, who is ultimately accountable at this level to make sure the validity of the count, or is it done? And I'm only asking because where it says every resident of Door County has, counts and deserves to be counted. I agree with that. But who's keeping track of somebody that is here at the time they're doing it, not from Chicago, Milwaukee, or wherever else? Where is that ultimate check and balance coming from to make sure that it's a Door County resident?
That's the U.S. Census Bureau themselves when they do the counts. So they're going to switch to go much more digital this year. So a lot of the stuff you'll be able to do actually online. And there's going to be some, so we actually did ask some questions in terms of that, of how do we make sure people aren't, especially if they move down to Florida at this point in time, how do we make sure that they're provided the opportunity to say that I'm a Door County resident? So they said that they are, when they do the training, in terms of that, they'll go through that process with their representatives that would go out and canvass. But again, a lot of it's going to be this online
So it's the opinion of
education.
the canvassers are the ones that are really making the decision, or?
Well, it's the canvassers, but honestly, the canvassers will only go out after they don't get a responses either from an online response or the mailer response, is our understanding. So there's that process you'll see in the timeline, where if they don't have a response, that's when they'll follow up actually with a mailing or potentially some canvassers to go out, depending on whether or not they have people that are employed to do it.
Anybody else? Biz?
Yeah, I think in the past, we've been told that, and I could be wrong on the exact percent, but like 47% of the property owners in Door County don't vote here. They vote wherever their main home is, not their vacation home. So, those people, I suspect, they don't vote here. Maybe they're here, but they don't vote here.
Correct.
Anything else? If not, since there's compensation potentially involved, we're going to go to the voter board.
passed on a vote of 21 yes, 0 no.
I think you see the clicker problem is rotating through the county board.
If I could, now just to finish up, if there is, again, I'm maybe looking for maybe 1 or 2 county board individuals that might be at least interested in sitting in. So if you are, please let me know. I'm sure you guys are all excited with the census and wanting to promote that. But if you are interested, maybe if you could contact my office, again, just because of the timing so tight. And again, I'm expecting maybe 2 to 3 meetings as far as a commitment. But if you are interested, please let me know.
All right, we will move to our annual meeting, which will cover compensation, mileage reimbursement of county board members prior to the next election, before papers are taken out, so this has to be done before December 1st. Okay. So what we need to do as far as compensation is we need to reaffirm the compensation. So we currently have in place a compensation program or plan that we agreed to over the last couple of months. So what we need to do is we need to make a motion to reaffirm the existing compensation plan. And if anybody wants to make an amendment, the amendment would be made before any vote is taken. Okay? So I'm looking for a motion to approve the existing compensation plan as it now exists.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay?
Did we get a second?
We got a second, yes, so we could discuss. So any discussion on the current compensation plan?
Can I explain what this, make
Yes,
sure we're on the
please.
same page what the current is? So our interpretation of what the current one is our existing compensation, in other words, for attending the meetings with the per diem, but it also, because you voted on it last week, does include option A, which is the $2,000. So that is what your existing compensation plan is right now. So this will give you a base, so we're all at the same level.
Okay. Dan?
Well, I'd like to make an amendment to the motion, is that what I got? To go to option B, the salary that we once voted on here a couple months ago. My reason for bringing it back is that we voted on a couple months ago and actually got a majority of the people that voted for it, but we missed it by 1 vote because we have to have a supermajority. So I guess I'd like to, and we've discussed this time and time again, everybody should know what we're talking about, I think, except for Alexis here, wasn't here on all those arguments. My thoughts is that this goes back quite a few years. I told David I had 4 years of it.
Can we get a second?
Second.
Okay.
I told David that I had 4 years of it, and David's only had 3.5 years of it. I think this will alleviate a lot of the arguments on salary and who's on what committee, and we're all equally elected, and this will make us have an equal say in how much we get paid, and we'll all be equally paid. And I think it'll save a lot of the arguments over the next, because otherwise they're going to come back again a year and a half from now.
Discussion. Linda?
Did Mr. Osted state an annual salary in his motion?
Yeah, it's in that option B. in your-
7,500?
7,500, correct.
Okay, then I would just like to repeat what I said in July earlier this year, that proposed annual salary of 7,500 is higher, plus another 2,000 if you're going to do that, or 1,500. That exceeds all the other salaried supervisors in the state, county salaried supervisors, to the best of my knowledge.
So I just want to clarify something that Linda said. She referred to the $2,000 or $1,500 or $1,200 as listed in option B, the salary amendment that Dan is talking about. It's $1,200. So,
In addition to the 7,500.
correct.
I need clarification on that.
Okay.
Please. I just didn't understand the totals.
The total, okay.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
sorry.
Is there? No,
I'm new
absolutely.
here.
So under our existing payment plan option, with the, includes A, there's the cap of the $2,000 for your, what we consider for meetings outside of your regular committee meetings. That cap does include your per diem, which is why it's higher. So, for example, if you'd attend WCA, you'd also include your per diem for attending WCA as part of that, against that cap. If we go to option B, which would be the salary, it actually drops back down because you are now under a salary. So you're not collecting per diem whatsoever when you go to these conferences. So that's why it got dropped down, because it's no longer including the per diem related to those sessions. So it's actually, yeah, it's pretty easy on that part.
Yeah, so it would be the 70, sorry.
Go ahead.
So it would be the 7,500, but the cap would be the 1,200 per diem.
Correct.
For option B. Thank you.
Correct.
That's-
Correct.
I'm on it.
Vinnie?
I guess just clarifying that, but the 1,200 is also seen as expenses you spend. It's not 1,200, I mean, just to make that clear, that's no per diem, that's just, if you spent the money on a hotel, if you spent the money driving, you're reimbursed for what you spent. Yeah.
Not mileage.
Okay, not
Not
mileage.
mileage, not
Right.
mileage though.
Mileage is
Okay.
outside the 1,200.
Okay, registration fee, that's right.
Registration and lodging.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Susan?
I think with either option, whether it's the per diem option or the salary option, we're getting paid more than most supervisors in the state. So I don't think, I'm not saying that that's not a valid concern, it is, but I think either way we are. So I'd suggest that maybe the vote is on the basis of your philosophy of how we should get paid as opposed to the exact numbers, because I think we're still probably all over the map with regard to numbers, with regard to these things.
Vinnie?
I need a refresher, do we have a gauge on this for the state, or could we be refreshed on that? You know, for how we compare to other counties, because I know we talked about it months ago, but I don't really remember. I mean, just ballpark, people keep referencing that, but I just wondering where we fall.
I think it was in the June.
Yeah, we
July
actually
packet.
included in a
Was it
packet, but
June or July packet.
I mean, to be honest, it is all over the map in terms of what the compensation is. I know we passed out that survey, and I'd probably do it injustice, because it'd be too hard to give you an average or even a summary, because it's a little bit different. There are some that do have a salary, but there are some that do, their salaries or their meeting expenses entirely different than what we do. So it's kind of, even to compare apples to apples is a little bit difficult to do that, so.
Thank you.
Biz?
I did a little bit of math here, and I added the $1,200 to the $7,500, because although that pays for hotels and stuff, it's still money that the taxpayers have to pay. So that added together is $8,700. And when you take that times 21 people, that comes out to $182,700. And our tax levy for 2020 is $134,000. So this is significantly higher than our tax levy, and it's costing the taxpayers a lot more money, so I can't support the salary. It just, it's a lot more money, not a little bit, it's quite a bit more. Am I right or wrong on that, Ken?
You're right.
Partially, well, yes and no, because the only thing you're not accounting for is that right now, all of your travel expenses for every single committee is actually built into their department budgets. So there's a significant amount of funding that's, for example, in land and water, highway, all those. So all of those expenses are actually built in to their budgets. So if we would, in essence, agglomerate all that, we're very close. I did mention we're probably, if you're looking, again, this on the math side. When I originally proposed this, I originally had a number of that $6,500. That was probably apples to apple, the closest, including the travel. But again, it also varies on a year. So for example, when we do the community center, our expenses were higher. So actually that flat rate probably would have been lower. So again, the $7,500, I'm fine with that aspect. It is higher on average, maybe per se, if I did like a 5-year trend. But again, we're within a ballpark in terms of our expenses. I guess, again, I think I mentioned it before. It's a matter of really a philosophy of how you think you're getting paid and the work that you do in terms of whether you think it's all representative of attending a meeting, or do you also account for those expenses that you do, the emails at home, reviewing the agendas and all the other kind of stuff that you do outside of just a meeting. Does that account for something? So it's just a matter of a philosophy of how do you think as a member should you or future members be paid in terms of what the work they put into it.
Yes, sir.
That 1,200 also is a max. For instance, my first year, I didn't go to the WCA conference, so my amount was 0. You know, and I went this year, and I still probably didn't hit that 1,200. So that's going by max. So not necessarily everyone's going to hit that. For instance, I've come nowhere near that. You know, so saying the 180 to 1,700, yeah, that's the most. Reality, it's probably rarely, if ever, going to hit that.
John?
First of all, let me say, whichever way we go, the taxpayer is going to be a winner. Because we have to get a control on this situation that we got going. So the taxpayer is going to be a winner. As far as which way we go, I always felt, and I still do feel today, you should get paid for what you do, not who you are.
Linda?
For those supervisors that are on the resource planning committee, the hours that they put in, that would also be covered by the 7,500? They would not get paid in addition?
That's correct. David?
2 questions. I don't see it written here. If you don't attend a meeting, is there a penalty? At one time there was, that if you didn't attend so many meetings, you got docked, so that's gone.
I think if you recall, we removed that.
Okay.
We removed the penalty.
So basically, I could become a county board member and not attend a single meeting, including this monthly meeting, and still get paid the same dollar value. If there is a committee meeting in which the chair is unable to attend, which means the vice chair takes the seat, what happens in that case?
Again, that was discussed and we pulled it out, so the vice chair just chairs the meeting, but they get paid the same thing.
I want to make sure everybody understood that. To one of the comments that Supervisor Nina said, I have a difficulty getting paid for something I don't do. If I didn't attend a meeting, then I shouldn't get paid. As far as planning ahead of time, every one of us sit and read our packets and that stuff, hopefully, before the meeting you attend. RPC happens to have considerably more time invested normally. I don't see it this pays you for that time. I see that as my hourly rate for the meeting, paying me for that time.
Yes, sir.
That being said, though, as a voter, if I found out the person representing me never went to meeting, never showed up or anything like that, they wouldn't be in office. That's when, for instance, recalls happen, you know. So if somebody didn't show, if I never saw them at a county board meeting, never heard of them going to a meeting, they wouldn't be in office next time.
And unfortunately, that's a common thought, but I could sit here and name several individuals, not currently sitting on this board, but on other boards that are paid to attend and don't attend. And they still get reelected. So I always have an argument with that.
Leaves it up to the voter, either way. It's up to the voter.
It is.
To the voter.
They choose to feel that they know that.
Anybody else? Okay, so we're going to take a vote on the amendment. So the amendment would be to switch the compensation plan to salary rather than the current per diem plan.
This would be
Did I say that right?
supermajority again?
No, to amend
Majority.
it is a simple majority,
Majority.
and then once
Okay.
it's amended, to adopt it would be 2/3.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Linda?
So we're basically looking at option B, correct?
The amendment is for
Correct.
option
The
B,
amendment.
correct.
And Mr. Chairman, as clarification, we already have a set policy right now. It actually is option A.
Correct.
So no matter what happens during the year, as long as if everything fails, option A is still going into effect April 1st or April whatever.
Yes.
If,
Yeah,
assuming it was,
But we're going to reaffirm that
Right.
on the
After
vote,
the fact.
after the fact.
Correct.
yes.
Okay, so the amendment to amend the compensation plan, current compensation plan to the salary is a simple majority. Then after we take the amendment vote, whatever the outcome is, it takes a supermajority to approve it for the annual meeting. Okay? Clear as mud? Okay. So this is to vote on whether or not to change to salary. Whenever you're ready. That is passed 12 yes, 9 no, 0 absent. So the amendment passed. So now what's before us to vote on and discuss is we need a supermajority to pass this compensation plan for purposes of the next election cycle.
And remind us of the supermajority number.
16?
14.
14.
14.
14.
Okay, any questions of the discussion, clarification, more confusion? Megan?
I'll just throw my hat in the ring here for a second. Every professional position that I have held, when you reach a certain point in that profession, whether it was in banking or manufacturing or whatever that might be, you reached salary. That was a thing, all right? Oh, I'm salaried, right? Did my performance go down then? No, I ended up working 60, 70 hours a week for the same amount of money, all right? This has all been said. We're all adults. We are professionals. This is a professional position that we've been elected to. Yes, there is the possibility of people shirking that responsibility. I don't see that happening. That is sincerely not a concern of mine at all in this. So that everybody knows where I stand on it, so.
Okay. Anybody else? John?
Just 2 cents worth. We just passed a budget of $30+ million. What are we talking here? Less than 0.5% of what we just passed. I weighed on this a lot, leaning towards not the salary. I don't see a huge difference between the two. Listening to Ken and his figures and everybody else's figures, and I'm going to agree with Megan that we're adults here. We provide a service. We are elected officials. We're here to do a job for those people. I don't think we're being overly compensated per se. Just my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you.
Or cent and a half.
Susan?
I'd just like to add that, to my knowledge, we've never had a salary, or if we did, it's long before I paid any attention to county board. So, but I do know that there have been frustrations with the per diem system, because if there hadn't been, we wouldn't talk about this to the nth degree that we do constantly every year. So frankly, I'd like to try it and see if this couldn't work more smoothly and make less for our staff to deal with our money.
Can I add one thing, David?
Please.
I'll just add my last 2 cents on this. Again, whatever you vote, I totally support, because I have to.
You don't have to.
Either way, I'm still going to pay you. But again, I guess the one thing I do look at, obviously as an organization, I guess I'm trying to look at similar to what we do for recruitment for our staff within the organization itself. And again, I look at some of the turnover that we have on a county board and some of the professionalism that we've had on the board for so long. I guess from my standpoint, having the ability to say someone that they have this amount, whatever the amount is, but hey, you're going to make this much per month and give us your all and your time for that has value in terms of trying to draw some of those types of people into the county board and involvement in local units of government that we hadn't had in the past. I know people say that I took this position without even knowing what I'm getting paid. I understand that mentality and I appreciate that mentality. But again, for someone to come on board and say, well, for this month I'm going to get $100 because I got assigned one committee, but I still put in all the time to read all the other committee minutes and learn about the organization and try to get involved, and I still attend WCA. That's entirely different than, someone that is fortunate enough to be more senior and maybe got more committees is going to get $500 a month in per diem. And again, I understand the mentality that you get what you paid for, but I also think the mentality is that we also need to think of what the professionals bring to the position, and this, as we've talked about before, you're trying to hold me accountable to share what's going on within the organization. I want to be able to say the same thing to the county board members, is that you're taking the time, not just because you're on RPC, that you're actually looking at that RPC packet, or you're looking at that financial packet, so that way when we don't have full committee reports, you still know what's going on in this organization. It's important that we have the county board that's truly engaged throughout the organization. So if we have the mentality that I'm only going to focus on getting paid because I'm on this committee and I have that tunnel vision, we are losing as an organization. I need you as a county board to engage in your committee, but I also need you to engage in all the other committees and look at those minutes and engage in that. And to me, that's time outside of sitting in that back room or at the Justice Center. So from that standpoint, that's the only thing I value. Whatever the number is and all that kind of stuff like that, I'm just really pushing for how we sell ourselves as an organization and how we, as a collective, hold the expectations up to all the county board members to say, it's just not your committee work. I want you involved in all aspects of the organization and reviewing all the materials and being fully engaged, because when it gets to this level, I need you to know what you're voting on. So from that aspect, that's my only sell in terms of the way I'm looking at it.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, if this option B would pass, then at the organizational meeting, the county board chair, whoever's elected to that position, assigns the committees. And in the past, supervisors have been on the high end as high as 7 or 8 committees, and on the low end, maybe only 3 or 4. So do you expect that if this passes, the new county board chairman will give all 21 equal committees? They'll be assigned to like 4 or whatever that number is to divide it up equally?
I can only describe what we've tried to do in the past. The past 2 cycles, what I've tried to do is I've tried to make equal committee assignments, the same number of assignments. However, some of them meet quarterly rather than monthly. Some of them meet twice a month rather than monthly. Some of them meet out of town as opposed to intent. So I've always tried to balance it out. I've tried to speak with each of you prior to try and balance it out. So when you normally see somebody with 7, 8, or 9 committees, I think if you take a closer look, you'll see 3 or 4 of those are quarterly meetings or only meet once a year or may not meet at all. For instance, the negotiating committee. Unless there's something to do in contracts that particular year, there won't even be any meetings. So I've tried to balance it. The active committee part, I've tried to balance it. So there's always going to be some outliers on either end, but that's what I've tried to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 2 things that what Ken said is true. We're county board members 365 days a year, or 366 maybe next year, whatever it is. And we're paid equally, elected by the same number of people. And I think we should be paid equally, not by how many meetings we go to. And everybody participates all day long. I mean, I talk county board all day sometimes, it seems like. And I did the same thing that David did when I was chairman. We tried to balance it out. Almost everybody had 3 or 4 committees, major committees. The complicated, we tried to have north, south, and city equally represented. And we split the chairmans up. I think almost everybody had as many chairmans as we had. Each person had a chairmanship of some committee. So we tried to level it out. He did the same thing I did. And so we're all equal. That's the thing.
John?
Yeah, but Dan, you and I have been around for quite a while, and we've seen where we had supervisors sitting in Florida for 3 months and didn't know whether it snowed or not in Door County.
And didn't care.
And didn't care.
I guess you're always going to have that. You know, you're always going to have inequality there. But you got to leave it up to the people to get rid of that person.
Megan?
I will also add that when I'm having discussions with folks, I hope we can all agree that the more people that are cognizant of and involved in our local government, the better, right? So we want more people running for seats. We want more people really contending for those positions from all different walks of life and like the whole gamut of the population, right? While I'm having conversations with folks about what county board's all about, and I get to the part where they're like, well, do you get paid? And I start talking to them about compensation and describing, how it works. Their eyes go like this. And they're like, what? It doesn't sound professional. It doesn't feel professional. So that right there is something that happens on a regular basis. And I can say, yeah, you get paid for the meetings you go to. And then they ask, well, is that all you do? You only focus on those meetings? You don't have to do anything with all the other committees? I'm like, well, no, that's not the case. So that's the message that's sent by that.
Helen? Oh, I was just going to say that I'm under one system where I get a salary. It's really sweet because you leave the meeting, you don't have to worry about anything. So that part of it's fairly nice, and that the compensation is about equal. And the other thing is, I'm retired. I have no grandchildren is how I explain it when people say, well, why are you so busy? Well, I don't have any grandkids and I'm retired. Now, I don't expect someone who has kids of school age or someone who has other things going on to maybe even take on as much. They've got other things going on. I know when I was younger, I had a lot of other commitments. I'm able to put more time and energy into this only because of where I am in life. And so I think when you start doing this one's doing more than that one, et cetera, I kind of agree with the Florida for 3 months thing, though. I think you should be, if you want to run for office, I think I have an expectation that you would pretty much be available and be at meetings. But it is really kind of nice to walk out of a meeting and not have to try to figure out, number one, what's the per diem code and and how much am I getting paid, and figure that all out. And I can't imagine what it is on the other end for the person that has to look at all of our timesheets and try to decide whether we even got it right. It's not even a question of anybody trying to cheat anybody. It's just like, how wrong are most of us? We're wrong a lot of the time. So my 2 cents.
Vinny?
I would just add to that, having a school-age child and having a full-time job and doing this, you make time to do it, you find the time to do it, you stick to your commitments if you are running. And there's a whole other portion of this that people maybe assume that have been here a long time or who are new as well. There's a whole role of this of knowing what's going on in your towns and villages or areas that you represent and having open dialogue with them on a regular basis, because that ends up being some of the only constituents that talk to you unless they have a complaint, which is fine, but you find out a lot by attending town meetings and village meetings, and that's all unpaid for time as well, where you're just trying to represent your district the best way you can. And I know some people sit on those other committees and boards, but that would be very difficult to do having a full-time job, school-age child. And there's, so that's just extra time you put in because you want to be a good representative. So I agree with the salary position for that as well.
Nissa?
I assume by going to salary, that would free up, for instance, Jill or any future county clerk's time to do other stuff that they can't get to because they're correcting all of our mistakes, or, whoever's handling payroll, for instance. Because I'll be honest, I've messed up sending the per diem info a few times, as I'm sure quite a few other people have. So that means, back and forth emails when she or whoever is dealing with it can deal with something else that's important.
Yeah. Dave?
Yeah, I guess I've always been a proponent of getting paid for what we're doing, and I guess I'd make a comment to Dan. He's often told me in the past, if I lived up where you are, I wouldn't be on county board. I can get there in 5 minutes, and you people traveling a half hour or an hour.
Mileage is still on there, though.
Mileage is, but it doesn't account for any time there either. So I think the more often we come, we're compensated if we're coming.
A better feeling that you should show up.
Mhm.
Okay. Anybody else? John?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to call the vote.
Okay. So what we're going to be voting on, just to clarify, is an affirmative yes vote, a super majority yes vote. Okay.
You got to vote on the call first.
I know that.
Okay.
Is for the salary with the $1,200 registration per diem piece. If that passes. If it fails, what's going to be in place is the existing plan that was voted on last month,
continue the per diem with the $2,000 cap for the out-of-county expenses. Okay? So first of all, on a call for the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. With that, we will go to the voter board.
Supermajority.
Supermajority. Has failed. 13 yes, 8 no. Okay, so for the next election cycle, next 2 years, it will be the per diem with the $2,000 annual cap. Rules of order. Grant, was there anything you wanted to explain about rules of order or any changes?
No, the only change we've included was to recognize the appropriate term for the County Highway Committee. It had been 1 year, and it should be 2. That's what we've been doing. But aside from that, I was not made aware of any other changes that anybody wanted.
Okay. So we need to vote on that change?
Yes. And just vote on the rules of order themselves.
Right, right. So there was nothing else you wanted to mention about rules of order? No. Okay. I believe that was the only thing that was changed in the rules of order was what he's referring to. So, anybody have any discussion or comments or questions about the rules of order? Susan?
I hesitate to bring it up, but it isn't a rule of order, I don't think, but I'm just going to throw it out there for food for thought for those that are going to take out papers and run again. I would love it if when the proposed chairman or whoever sends out the questionnaire to the new county board people has something on there asking about times available for committee meetings, so that at the April organizational meeting, the discussion could be held about the best time for that body to meet. I feel like when it seems like it's carved in stone before people ever run, then the concept that maybe there is a better time to meet than 9 or 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning is never even discussed. I'm not saying it's not the best time. I'm simply saying I think that the new county board ought to have a say in the discussion of when that is. And if they've had time to think about it and the information is there as to who's available when, that might facilitate such a discussion. So I just throw that out as food for thought.
Anybody else? If not by voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinances 2019-14, County Highway Commissioners Appointment, Term, Supervision, and Removal. Could I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. You want to explain?
Maybe Grant could do this one.
Grant, do you want to explain?
Yes. I think John Ninus had pointed out that when John Kaloji was appointed, and I should note that's on page 74 of your packet, resolution number 44-00, no provision was made for a specific term. And I think what we all presumed was that John would have an indeterminate term, which means he would serve until he was removed. But when John brought that to our attention, I did some research, and what the amendatory ordinance does is reflect the statute that the presumptive term is 2 years unless the county board by ordinance sets a different term. And also I took the liberty of including in this ordinance the statutory provision as to the appointment powers and supervision powers in a county that has a county administrator. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or concerns.
David?
Did I misunderstand you? Because when I read this differently. In the statutes, it's a 2-year term, right?
Presumptive 2-year term unless the county board by ordinance sets a different term.
Okay, so that's what the B1 is, term of service is indeterminate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it officially recognizes essentially what we've been doing since he's been appointed in the first 2,000, whatever it was.
Correct.
So
What did he say?
it officially recognizes what we've been doing from his original appointment, which is, if you didn't, it would have been a 2-year term, correct?
Correct.
Which means officially he does not have a term at this moment, because he's never been reappointed, and we never had an ordinance that outlined that he needed to be either reappointed every 2 years, or I should say that we never had an ordinance until this one we're going to approve, or vote on, says that he has an indeterminate window of time to be employed until the administrator decides, or he decides to retire.
That's correct.
What Andy Phillips told me when I questioned him on this, he says we should have an appointment every year confirmed by the county board. That's the statutes.
I would rather stick with the statute orientation.
But what?
I would rather stick with the statute orientation. If it says it's a 2-year reappointment, that's the way.
Well, that's what Andy Phillips says. Every year, for 2 years, we're supposed to he's supposed to be appointed by the county board, by the administrator, and then we're supposed to approve it, like we do other outfits. That's what Andy Phillips says, and we haven't been doing it.
Right.
And that's why I wanted to bring that forward. Let's do it right.
Well, this proposed ordinance would state that we would not be doing that. As written, he would have an indeterminate right?
Correct.
Right, subject to the powers of removal by the county administrator.
Correct.
They're both right.
No.
Yeah, they are. This is saying we're taking the power from the statute and doing it legally at a local level where it's indeterminate, you don't do it every 2 years, and now Ken's got the authority to either crap can them or keep them going.
Was your intention to be to reaffirm his appointment every 2 years?
That was my intentions with Andy Phillips, to reaffirm the appointment every 2 years before the county board.
And that's not what this says.
It's given the option to put it off of the statute, but put it in the power of the county administrator.
Okay, so let me let me clarify. So, again, Mr. Nidus brought up the discussion about having it reappointed every 2 years. It was discussed at the administrative committee, and the administrative committee voted on not reaffirming them every 2 years. They voted to make it an indeterminate amount. That was at the motion presented at the administrative committee, and the administrative committee is recommending that is how it be written up as an ordinance. So again, I know, John, you brought it up as it should be an appointment every 2 years. At admin committee, we discussed it. And I think the exact motion is let's leave it as it is, where it's under the authority of the county administrator. That was what was passed at admin. Grant put it into the form of the ordinance, and that's what's before you here. So the admin committee recommended that we stay under the current form, and that's where it's the county administrator. It's on here for your discussion now. You have the option of supporting that ordinance as presented, or, again, reverting back to the 2-year appointment process.
Basically, this ordinance should have been put into place in 2000.
Whenever it started, yeah.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Joe? But the statute allows for this to also be in place.
Correct.
That's my point. It's not that we're not being illegal anymore.
Correct.
It's a cleanup ordinance,
Sure.
but it's not what John was describing just now.
Correct.
Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I don't know where I am.
Okay. Every department head is pretty much at the county administrator's whim, except I think the county conservationist.
I think that's right.
And Corporation Council. We're similarly situated.
Well, you only need 5 of us to vote you out, right?
Maybe one.
Anyway, I'm being serious here now. If the highway committee went to work and had discussed it, if there was something drastic happening, and the highway committee voted unanimously, that person has to go, they present it to the administrator, and I would imagine that would have some weight yet.
I would certainly hope so.
Well, if I want to keep my job, yeah.
So
Otherwise, that brings up another thing.
So it doesn't change much. It doesn't change much, no matter how we do it. It's, you know.
Anybody else? So since it's an ordinance, we need to go to the voter board. That's passed 18 yes, 3 no. Okay, new business. Door County facility on Washington. Just says Washington, not Washington Island.
Down at Washington.
Oh, that's correct.
Down at
The Village of Big Harbor.
No, it says on Washington.
Washington, sorry.
Oh, it's cheaper.
Picky.
So again, this was an item that you guys requested to put back on the agenda. Obviously, we had the tour where we had, I think, 18 of the 21 supervisors there. Again, just for quick context, we're looking at an option for a Door County facility. I still have that summary, I guess, provided at your desk, just in terms of the wish list type items. And again, what we're looking at is potentially two options. One would be obviously looking at that piece of property and still pursuing that as a donation. And the other option obviously was that facility in terms of potentially looking at that option. What I was looking for today and what I had brought up at the last meeting is that, and this my recommendation to you is that for us to, I guess, truly make a decision no matter which way we go, we probably should at least do some due diligence on that existing facility. And what I mean by that is working through Facilities and Parks of bringing on an architect and actually have them do an analysis on, I guess, converting that building to our use, and then having a projected budget related to that. And then that would be, I guess, part of our discussions moving forward of actually looking at that facility. In terms of, I guess, when we were there, for those that weren't there, the owner of that facility understands where we are in terms of a budget. I think he actually said it, so I'm not stepping out of bounds, but he does know that the building would take renovations and there'd be I guess, a budget related to that would actually affect what we can spend in the building, and he still felt that that was within reason in terms of negotiations, in terms of moving forward with that facility with them, should we choose to pursue it. Doesn't mean we have to, but at least gives us an option of, I guess, looking at everything. So I'm guessing it's about $5,000 to $10,000 to bring on an architect to actually look at it. If we would pursue that, we would take it out of our existing funds that we have set aside for the project, which we have in a reserve account, but at least that gives us the ability to, I guess, put together, I guess, the full package in terms of what do we want to pursue or not pursue in terms of that project.
Comments? Randy?
Has anything gotten cleaned up with the donation of the land?
No, we've reached out twice and we still have not had any physical response back in terms of the donation on that piece of property.
Do we know the price of this building yet? I mean, we kind of hear that he's going to work with us, but work with us how?
Okay, again, normally what we do is we don't actually go into formal negotiations until you guys give me the authority to do such. But again, in our discussion, he knows that the budget that we have set aside was $800,000. We had discussed that there'd be renovations that could be anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000, and he said that those numbers are still within the wheelhouse of him working with us. That's as far as I went because I didn't have any other authorization to go any further. So that's kind of where that stands right there.
Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We want to cooperate, but the chairman of the town of Washington told us they're at least 3 years away. 5? I thought it was 3 years. To have any money for this project. They don't have nickel one. They didn't offer nickel one. We put money into this. What we'll do is we'll open up the door and we'll start spending money for this and this and this. And pretty soon we're so committed with funds that we put in, we'll get to the point where we say, well, we can't stop now. We've got all this money invested. We're going to build it. Every other town in the county has the right and will deserve a free building. Because if you do it for one, you do it for all. And we just can't afford to do that. So until the town of Washington, just like Bug did and just like Sister Bay did, where they came up with funds, until the town of Washington comes up with funds, concrete funds, not hollow promises, we shouldn't even be discussing this.
And
that's it.
And that's one thing, I think, actually, Ken, that's probably the best point that I like to clarify for everybody, and I think that's been the greatest confusion. And that kind of comes back in terms of why I wanted to make sure we actually met with the town. And this is where it's always got clouded up with the people outside of the town government and us, part of these negotiations and discussions. Your point is spot on. The town is not in a position to participate. What we're looking at is what we need for Door County only. I am not looking, whether it's that property or this building, to have any town participation. The town fiscally is not in a position to participate, and to be honest, there might not even be any interest, even if they had finances available. Remember, they asked us to vacate our existing ambulances out of that building because they want to expand into that building. When they had discussions internally, they thought that would be all they need. I know there's desires by people on the island, and Joe can clarify that, they'd love to be in a new facility or construct a new facility. But right now, that's probably not in the cards for a good 5 to, I'd say, 10 years. So when we presented all this, my intention is that whether that's that building or whether it's that property, we can design both for 10 years down the line. They could tie in or put it or request to be part of our project. But right now, this has nothing to do with the town, and that's the most important thing I got out of that meeting of why we went up there, is that, yes, they are not involved. And I think that's the critical part, and that's what differentiates us between Bug, Sister Bay, and all that stuff. So when I'm looking at the building, I'm looking at it for our use. If I'm looking at that property, I'm looking at it for our use. And we can design the property, the vacant property, for a potential expansion, but it may never happen. Likewise, for this building, we could look at it to say, could there be a potential use that the town could ask to be a part of? Potentially, but I'm not counting on it. So I think that's the most important thing.
So let me ask a clarifying question, in my mind. Do we still need to vacate? And because we need to be someplace?
Correct.
Or do we not need to vacate?
We do need to vacate. The resolution with the town still stands that they would like us to vacate out of that building.
When?
So,
Do you have a time frame?
in their resolution to us, they never gave us a specific time frame. At that time, when we discussed it, they thought that we'd probably, and Joel, you can correct me, but when we had those meetings, they thought we'd be, in my mind, already under construction at this point in time.
John?
But, yeah.
Sorry.
I know we want the county out, something like that.
John?
I took some time studying that and what was discussed on the island. And if I remember correctly, that building that they showed us was a little over 6,000 square feet, 3,000 per floor. Understanding that the town of Washington isn't ready to move on anything, I kind of took that out of my mind not to even look at that building. And I'm agreeing with Mr. Pavak here that we need to look at it as our facility alone, aside from what the town wishes are. We need to do something up there. I took the floor example that we had at Bug and worked things around for 2 sleeping rooms, 1 EMS office, 2 bathrooms, a county office, and a sheriff's office. And it's very similar in size to what Bug is, with the exception we need to add a meeting training room, which was also requested. The total square footage to that with the 2 ambulance bays and storage areas is about 5,053 square feet. So we need everything up that we looked at as far as their building that they proposed. I am now of the firm believer we need to build our own standalone building and not even spend money on that other building that they showed us.
Megan?
I would actually contend the opposite, looking at the cost of building new currently and what's been happening with the numbers that we've seen coming in. They've been just extremely high, much higher than what we had thought on almost every new build. So doing a renovation rather and getting slightly more square footage than what we require, as well as adding in the possibility of multi-use space, that would make me lean more towards the existing building.
Yes.
Yes, I think, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the best way to do this is the way it was done at Sister Bay and the way it was done down at Brussels. That when you build an EMS building, that the town or the village is ready to build their fire station right with it. And as far as them saying they want us to vacate, if we decide not to do anything at this point until they're more ready, I can't imagine they're going to kick us out of there, and where are they going to put their ambulance? Then they're going to just do away with ambulance on the island? That ain't going to happen. But Ken is kind of right. Until they're ready to build their fire station right with it, which is, I think, is the best way to go. And the chairman up there admitted that they're just not ready to build a fire station and go with us on a building because they're in debt too deep. So I just don't see the urgency to go up there and do a standalone building at this point.
Vinnie?
I have two. Do we have an idea of the assessed value of the property that we looked at? And then the other part of the question is, what's the average cost per foot to build new on the island? Because I feel that the island component is a different rate than you might find in Brussels or somewhere else for comparative. I think those would be, if we don't know now, that would be interesting information to have, which would also have me lead towards wanting to have an architect look at what it would cost to remodel the current building, just with those other figures in mind.
Susan?
To add to that, the $5,000 or $10,000 that I think is what you've talked about, Ken, to do that, could that include looking at both options?
Yes.
And giving us figures for both?
Yes, it could.
David?
In looking both of the properties, what does the land use department set for the zoning regulations for both of those properties? Does this kind of municipal service fit into both of those properties?
Yes, it does. It's conditional uses.
Just simple conditional use, nothing, no zoning change has to occur.
Correct.
Helen?
What I've heard from a few people is why doesn't, because there's been some back and forth with the donor and it's not gone particularly in the county's favor, would the county consider just purchasing that plot of land, which the donor has not purchased yet? So the land is basically sitting there.
That is also still an available option.
Laura?
Two comments or even questions just on this memo that we got for the Washington Island draft needs. So, for what's needed and what we could do or as a minimal, I kind of look at that a little differently. So we have, okay, this is our wish list, is what I look at it. Some of these rooms and spaces that are being requested could be consolidated into one. A training and a meeting room can also be your office space. A patient and a sleeping quarters can share the same. There's different things you can do with lock cabinets, et cetera. I don't necessarily think you need to have two unisex restrooms. One is fine. Looking at that, I think that can kind of change your square footage needs. I think you can get creative in that aspect. And then also just looking forward to at that, the building that we looked at. My feedback that I also took away from that is what it meant to the community. So as a county, if we have to go into a community of area of our county and we need to build something or we need space, facilities there, we should be looking at what that community wants out of us. And I took away that it would mean more to them if we would take over that building. That's what I walked away from, and is a future goal that they could be a part of that. Obviously, it's not till 5-10 years down the road, but I just thought I would have added that. If I'm not sure if anybody else had taken that away too. So thank you.
Dave?
Guess I'll go back to Supervisor Fisher's first comments about what we can afford to do. We started out putting $500,000 into the capital projects fund and then added another $300,000 to my recollection a year later, and now we're looking at even spending way more money. We started with the idea of a garage for the ambulance, and all of a sudden we're providing housing for EMTs or whoever the island thinks they need there, and for our staff to be able to go up there. I don't think any of us are, seems like we're not thinking of what Ken was presenting to us earlier this morning, that our budgets are running so tight. How are you going to continue to put more money into those projects and maintain those buildings and provide services to the island that, as Ken said, other communities aren't receiving.
Helen?
Well, I do think, though, that, I think I talked to Dave about this before, too. The island is different in that it is an island, and so I guess I don't see where they need to have less than, and I think there's always been this kind of less than attitude, in a sense, about the island. I think that you do have to take into account that there may be needs up there that you don't have in Liberty Grove or you don't have in Brussels. They don't have the freedom to come and go. And I know one of the things that Jennifer Fitzgerald was there from the ADRC, and she was there basically from the nutrition program, taking a look at the possibility, if we did have that building, the dairy, if we did have that, would that possibly be a meal site? People, we have other needs besides just providing the bare minimum. We also have needs to try to provide for the well-being of people, the isolation of older folks, nutrition of older folks. So I think that was something, too, that I think, maybe we need to think about. And we need to think about how successful also the rehabbing of the highway department has been as far as putting Sturgeon Bay on the map, putting Door County on the map, and what it really has done for a whole population of residents. So we have people from Northern Door coming down and using the facility. We have a lot of people from Southern Door that come up and use the facility. It's really allowed us to really expand the services. That would be an additional use to that, possible additional use to that building. And the ADRC and the things that we are required to provide for our seniors are also things that the people on Washington Island can't easily come down and use the services on the county. And I think we need to take some of that into account also. So it's not just the bottom line, there's also the people aspect of it and some of those incidentals that make someone's life better. And I think that is also one of the things that we're kind of charged with as being county board supervisors, is not just the money, but also the quality of life that we offer our residents. And we cannot forget that Washington Island does have some unique issues.
Linda?
Whatever the county decides to do and whenever the county decides to do that, I think we need a really careful evaluation between trying to retrofit an existing building. Now, I know this building is in much better shape than the Yonkers building, but look what we're discovering, investing in an existing building versus starting from scratch with our own piece of property and our own design building. So at this point, I think having our own piece of property and designing from scratch is the better value than attempting to retrofit an existing building.
Okay. Dan?
What we're talking about right now is spending between $5,000 and $10,000.
I'm not spending, but
basically what you're saying. I agree with what everybody says, but for $5,000 or $10,000, we'll have it in black and white.
Yeah.
What it costs to rehab this building
Right.
versus what it costs to build new one. It's on very much the way we did with the highway shop ambulance garage. We designed a senior citizen center, whatever you want to call it, by itself, and an ambulance garage by itself. And when it came down to the end, we combined the two, and we made a couple decisions off it. $5,000 to $10,000 isn't a real. It's a lot of money in one respect, but it'll give us the answers to what we're saying here.
I'm hoping right.
Hopefully. I don't know if you get it done for $5,000 to $10,000, so.
Oh, that's, I'm worried about it. Might be a little bit more, but it's still worth it. Yeah.
Vinnie, did you have something?
Same thing, I just think
Okay.
I think everything we're talking about is important, but I think we don't have enough facts we need more facts, and I think that's what approving the money would help us do.
Okay.
So,
Biz?
Yeah, what Dan says is right, but once you have that number, that's only good for so long. And then you're starting to commit yourself to going ahead and doing it. The thing is, it's going to cost more money to build a building on Washington Island than on the mainland, and we found that out with Cana Island. When it's unique like that, for the contractors to go up there, now they're looking at places to sleep with it's going to cost more money on an island, and that's what happened at Cana Island. And to go ahead and design the building now, and, the unique way of doing this is have them ready to build a fire station with it like we did in a couple other, down at Brussels and up at Sister Bay. And they're just not ready up there to do anything like that, and they're saying, 3 to 5 years before they're going to be ready. It just, to me, to go ahead and design it, that's good for maybe so many months, and then those numbers are all obsolete.
Why do we have to design a building that might include the fire station? Just do it ourselves at ambulance garage, period. Why keep bringing up? Why should
Because the unique way to do it is they go side and side. Dan, you're a fireman. Firemen and ambulance go hand in hand with each other, and it's the unique way of doing it is to do it together.
Susan?
I would agree with Biz that that's the unique way, but if we can't, we can't. I guess if we spend the 5 or 10 or slightly more, whatever, to get both options, I would like to see the options contain a range so that we don't get a drawing of the Cadillac, we get a drawing of the jalopy, and then maybe what it would cost to add a few other things, but let's see a range of possibilities.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that we have all these bullet points on information and sort of a wish list from all of the different departments. I guess what I'd be curious about, and this kind of goes along with what Vinny said about just we need more information, rating each one of these bullet points on a scale of 1 to 5, how desperate, how soon, right? Like, how long can we do what Biz is suggesting? Can we wait 5, 6, 8, 10 years to build a combined facility? Will these other needs suffer for that? And so I'm wondering, we're talking about spending money on an architect to look at retrofitting this building. Maybe our option is an option is to have an architect take these bullet points and design us a standalone building, and then let's see what that's going to cost. Come at it from that angle.
That's what we're saying we're going to do. So I guess, again, just so we're all on the same page, I guess what I'm looking for, authorization, again, I'm saying 5 to 10. If we do both, it's going to be a little bit higher, so trying to figure out what's a good cap. But let's just, in general, for example, and I can't pick a contractor, but we've worked with a contractor in the past that's been very good at doing cost projections for us. So in essence, what we need to do is just a basic set of drawings of what would it take to retrofit that building, what are the related costs, give us a budget for that. Then also, based off this list, I've heard you to say that this is a nice wish list, but we could probably scale some stuff back. But if we did a basic building with trying to scale that back, as John had brought up, what is the cost per square foot to make that building happen? Let's look at them together, and then let's figure out if, again, at least that way we know what the two options are, and maybe both those options come in even higher than we even want to consider. We have to retool that, but at least right now, I think we're not in a position, I think all the points that everyone said is valid, but we need to have something that at least gets us to that next point of being able to have a discussion and make a decision, and that's all I'm looking for authorization to do. Just as we've done in other projects, so I don't know what a good number is. I'm looking at Grant to give me some feedback, but just professionally, I'm thinking to do both of those, you're probably, what, 15? I don't know, 15? I don't know.
Yeah, I think the way it's on the agenda today, what we're looking for is just to gauge the temperature of the county board and get some direction as to which way to go. I would imagine that we'll do like an mini RFQ, RFP, and if numbers come in under $10,000, we can go to the finance committee and get approval for the expenditure. If it's above that, we will have to come back here because it's going to require a 6590 resolution, but I think it's safe to say that we didn't want to go down any path until we had some idea of what you all were thinking. And
Would you include in that asking the town what their potential time frame is again?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I should note, since you're letting me talk, is the town board has been fairly generous in their eviction of us. They've made it clear, at least in our conversations, that we have as long as we need. Now, that's not forever, but there's going to come a time when they're going to say, okay, it's time to leave. So.
Dan.
Joel is quite quiet. I'd like to hear what he is.
Everybody thinks that I'm biased because I live there. Yes. Since I got on the county board, and I'm gonna rant for 5 minutes, it has always been my position, and you guys have set the terms, you old timers on here. The island's always been the redheaded stepchild of Door County. It's always been the case. I personally will take the position, we are not building an EMS facility. There has to be a multi-use facility, because whether it's EMS, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's zoning, whether it's sanitary, whether it's Meals on Wheels program, no matter what it is, look at every facility that goes on in this room. We get the short end of the stick up there. It's not because we're on an island, it's logistics, whatever it is. That's the wrong mentality and attitude to have, okay? So no matter what goes forward, whether it's a renovation, new, whatever, I don't give a rip what it is. Something needs to get done, and we need fairness of what goes on. Plain and simple. That's been my goal coming down here over a decade ago. I feel like we're kind of getting some headway. I agree with everything and every person that is said here on what needs to go forward. However, what Dan is proponent of here today, and I agree with it, and I'm going to make the motion at the end of this, is that $15,000 we've set aside or allocated now to do the study. Do it needs assessment, do it preliminary, whoever it is, do an RFP to do it. Put it on the table so it can come forward and see. Plain and simple. And yes, the town is in no position to do anything. So 100% guaranteed, my position is what needs to come out of this is a focus what the county needs to do to facilitate and provide there. Keep the town out of it now. We've been trying this for 5 years. The town doesn't have a clue what they're doing right now when it comes to working with the county, this sort of thing. No disregard to them. They can't do nothing right now. They shouldn't be part of the equation at this point in time. It's county facilitated, county orientated, county driven, what needs to be done for the county to provide the fair share to the island community. That's my 2 cents. Did you make a motion?
Is there a motion there, Joel?
Ken?
Not yet.
Wait.
Oh, not yet. Okay, no motions, okay.
Ken?
Yeah, well, first off, all it says here is new business, new Door County facility on Washington, well, town of Washington, we know what it is. There's nothing here that says we're going to take any action or any motion. Maybe we can do that anytime anyway, but I'm just saying, it's not on here for that.
Correct.
And by your own words, you just wanted to gauge what our sentiment is here.
Yeah, again.
Now, let me finish first. And Grant has said that the town has made it real clear to us that, yes, they'd like us to vacate so they can do whatever, but they're not in a position to do anything because they don't have nickel one, as I said earlier, okay? They're going to let us stay there. And we are doing what we need to do. We are providing the service. We're giving them, we have the ambulances there, okay? And the one thing that I really want to point out, your first words were, in the explanation, was $5,000 to $10,000 to do this study. In the 20 minutes we've been debating, you've already come out, and I said, it's going to go up, it's going to get higher and higher, and pretty soon we're getting so deep that we can't get out of it. Already you're saying $15,000 or more in those 20 minutes we talked. By tomorrow, it'll be $80,000, $90,000, and the town's not ready to do anything. We just, no, put it on hold. Let's look into it on our end, but let's not spend any money right now. Let's just take it nice and easy over at least the next, we've got a year or more before we come up to any conclusion on this that we want to build. We don't have to jump in there with money that's hard to come by. And again, we all went through the speech here on how bad it's going to be next year and the year after that to come up with this money. Don't be in a rush. I'm done.
John?
I don't think it's a rush. I have listened intently like everyone else. We've looked at this, and I'm going to agree with Joel, for over 5+ years talking about this. This is no surprise. The longer we wait, and Ken knows it, I know it, and everybody in this room knows it, the longer you wait, the more the cost goes up. And I'm not saying it's got to be a rush job. I think the prudent thing here has already been discussed, and that's to get the estimates of what either or would be. That's prudent in my mind as far as how we would move forward if we decide to move forward. We aren't going to be able to do it just by sitting on our fingers, guessing and hoping for the best. I think it is a prudent move to get those estimates, and let's figure it out from there.
Megan?
In addition, we don't need to be difficult. We sat down with the town. They made it very clear that they need that space, along with many other things, their buildings falling apart. They've made a request of us. We aren't in a position to be strongly arming them on that, on their property. If we have the ability to move forward, we should be moving forward.
Vinnie?
I just agree. I think that that's a respectful thing to do as a part of the county, and being on an island is obviously has its own challenges, but it doesn't mean that you should have any less services or time should take longer because we feel like we're not rushing. I think 5 years is not rushing at all. So I appreciate having some facts and figures about it and moving forward to get some answers, some ideas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's very, very disappointing that the Island Board has not set some money aside. You know, they've been asking this for 5 years, and they want something done. They should have been setting some money aside. And I don't know how they got so deep in debt. I don't think it was that years ago, but they set no money aside for this thing. And these people are right. I agree that we do need a facility up there to house other agencies. But it sure would be unique if they were ready to roll with a fire station like these other ones that we built. And they've set no money aside over the last maybe 2 or 3 years. No money's been set aside for this up there that I've been told about.
Randy?
One more. I think this project would be moving ahead right now if it wasn't for some of the demands of the person that owns the property and was going to donate it.
Susan?
I would only add that I very much appreciate the fact that we're talking about this with the full 21, and that all of us had the opportunity to see the facility on the island and the property. Our committees do wonderful work, but for having this have to move forward in one committee without all of our input, I think would have been unfortunate.
Got your direction?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. Alan?
I would just like to say from people that I've talked to and my own thoughts and probably a lot of people around this room, it really doesn't make any difference kind of which direction we go. I don't think we have to wait until the town is ready, and how the town got into debt is really their own issue, not ours. We do have a responsibility as a county to provide services, and I think the only way we can get the information is to go ahead and have a study done, and I would support that up to $15,000, because I know that's pretty much what something would cost to do it on both. And you're talking not just a rehab, but you're talking about both new and rehab, right?
Yep. Just so we're all on the same page, this is what I will do. Wayne's in the back, so Wayne and I will get a proposal that will look at a estimate to do renovations to the existing building and also give us a cost estimate for a potential facility based off what we think are reasonable needs. And then we will put that together and get that estimate. Again, if it's under $10,000, it would go through finance. If it's above $10,000, it'll come to the full county board, and we can have that same discussion about what we're spending on this project in terms of doing that analysis. But that's what I will do in terms of direction moving forward.
Dave?
I would ask that during these estimates that come back, no services are ever fixed. We always need to add something. So in both buildings, I would ask for some information and a basic concept of expandability of both cases. So in the existing structure, the ability, what their thoughts are, being able to move another bay in, another office, those kinds of things. In a new building, because I've certainly been in too many municipal buildings, including that they design based on a concept, and 10 years from now, it's difficult to add on. So it's the same thing. I just want to be prepared for the understanding of whether or not the choices we're looking at are capable of being done that way.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 16, I'm sorry, 15, review vouchers, claims, and bills. Announcements. Next county board meeting dates. Tentatively, we have admin meeting for the 10th, and we have county board for the 17th, but I'd kind of like to leave the county board for the 17th. If we have enough to have a meeting, we'll do the meeting. If not, we will notify everybody and we won't do the meeting. We'll just hold off till January. That acceptable?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. But it would be on the 17th. If we have it to be on the 17th, Joe, at 10?
I'm just double checking here because I don't know. Yeah, 10.
10, okay.
Admin 10 then too?
Yeah.
I did have two. Just two announcements for the, it was brought up. Again, we had the presentation last month by Aaron in terms of the water. They actually are going to do I guess, an update in terms of the initial results, and those are on Monday, December 9th at the Gibraltar Fire Station at 6 p.m. And then there is another location that's going to be on Tuesday, December 10th at 6 p.m. at the ADRC. So I know they brought that up at the, remember, we needed, is this at so many meetings? I'm trying to remember which one is this at. They just announced it, but I just want to make an announcement to the county board that those are going to be published. But if you want to see what those results are, those will be presented on the 9th again in Gibraltar or the 10th here at the ADRC.
What time is that? What times do they have?
They're both at 6 p.m.
Thank you.
And then just the other announcement is we are still planning to do a, what we call our, well, it's not Christmas dinner because it's after Christmas, but we usually do our dinner in January. Our post-holiday party, we can call it that. So if you're interested in participating, I know I got some recruits already that are smiling at me that are interested in helping, but so I got Nancy, Laura, and Linda that are willing to volunteer. But if there are anyone else interested, please give me a call and I will help get it set up in terms of what we're hoping to do. And we'll try to get a date and everything out early so that way you can mark your calendar. But usually we do either the first or second weekend in January.
Okay. The meeting per diem code is 1112. Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there's no further business conducted, I'd like to make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.